Old School Lane Casual Chats is brought to you by Old School Lane, producing various content from blogs, videos, and podcasts discussing about movies, TV shows, video games, and everything else in between since 2011. You can check out the podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, Overcast, Breaker, Pocket Cast, and YouTube. We're associated with Channel Frederator, Manic Expression, The Comic Book Cast, and The Arun Mehta Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Casual Chats. I'm Patricia, and I'm here with Chris, aka RowdyC. Welcome back, Chris.
Yo, and hello, all my rowdy friends.
So today, as of the recording of this podcast, is the 100th anniversary of Disney. So they've been doing a huge celebration over the past year, whether it be with the theme parks or whether it be with the specials, re-releasing some of their classic films on cinema. And right now they're going to be releasing a brand new short, which is going to be this huge crossover with all of the classic Disney characters. So yeah, this year has been a major monumental year for Disney, 2023, with this huge celebration of its past and what's going to be in the future. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and you definitely can't forget the fact that they have managed to succeed in more or less restoring, refurbishing, and re-releasing a number of their more classic shorts on Disney Plus as well. Some of them that I think a few people were wondering if we might ever see again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Especially since there's been a lot of demand for a lot of the shorts. I mean, it literally, like the first short that was ever created based off of the Silly Symphonies was just released recently, and people have been demanding for it for ever since Disney Plus came out. But no, we're starting to get a lot more stuff on Disney Plus, and there's going to be a lot more things to come as of the making of this. Wish, which is their film that is going to be the celebration of the Disney 100, which is the origin story of the star that was featured in Pinocchio, is going to be coming out this coming, I believe it's going to be next month or the next 2 months or so. So yeah, now I guess this will be a better time with the celebration of the 100th anniversary of Disney to look back on the 7 different eras. Now, for those who have not been tuning into our podcast, which by the way, we've been starting doing our look backs on the 7 eras since like 2015 or 2016, if you can believe it.
Absolutely. Just trying to keep chugging along with all of them. And I'm pretty sure we have at least one more to go on that, I believe.
Yes, we do. We have the revival era, and we're going to be talking about that next year for those who are wondering. So for those who are new to this podcast, Disney fans like to combine all of the Disney films and divide it into 7 different eras. And so we decided that this will be a fun time for us to look back on each of the 7 eras and give you our favorites of each particular era. And also talking about, what have been our favorites in these particular questions. So there's 10 of them. The first one is, who's our favorite protagonist? Who's our favorite sidekick / companion? Who's our favorite antagonist? What was the best setting? Which had the best art style / animation? Which has the best song / soundtrack? Which has the best story? Which film made the biggest impact? Which film do you feel is overlooked / underrated? And finally, what is your personal favorite film? So we're going to be going through each of the 7 eras, and we're going to be answering the following questions. So Chris, are you ready to get started?
Let's go.
All right. So the first one is going to be the golden era. So for those who are wondering, this is when Disney first had its start back in 1937. And we're going to be tackling in 5 films. So we have Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, and Bambi. So let's answer the first question. Out of the 5, who is our favorite protagonist?
Oh, I'm going to Well, fair warning here. Actually, this is definitely going to be a bit more unprepared than I hoped to be because I actually didn't. I came into this not knowing that we were going to be doing favorite protagonist from each era individually. So I have to give some thought about this. We're talking about the original protagonist from the original films. I guess if we really think about it, to be perfectly honest, it would probably be from one to I'm sorry. See, I apologize in advance. But I guess you might have to go with the one that started it all, Snow White herself. In that sense, just for the sense of the fact that none of the others would have probably existed without her.
Mm. That's actually a really good point because, I mean, Snow White was the one that pretty much started it all. And when you're looking into Snow White, of what she was able to bring into the Disney catalog, I mean, first of all, she's the very first Disney princess. And Disney is very well known for their princesses today. I mean, there's even still some demand of wanting to have a major princess crossover movie ever since we saw that scene in Wreck-It Ralph Breaks the Internet. And yeah, I would say that without Snow White, we wouldn't even have the films that we have today, and we wouldn't even be talking about all the Disney films. And also, if you were to look at Snow White as a standalone character, she's kind, she's supportive, she's relatable, and also, she has a sense of progression throughout the story where, she's very kind, but at the same time, she's able to carry on with all of her fears and overcome them. And then finally, she's able to just continue on with being the sweet and kind person towards the dwarves and towards the animals and towards the people around her. So yeah, I can see where you're coming from, Chris. Yeah, as for me, now this is a difficult one. Now I'm trying to decide between, I mean, it's essentially like four characters because, I mean, if you look at Fantasia, they don't exactly have, it's not necessarily a traditional Disney film. So I'm probably not going to count that as like a protagonist. So it's the choice between Snow White, Pinocchio, Dumbo, and Bambi. Now, it's difficult because I would say that Pinocchio and Bambi have themselves an arc where, they start things off at a blank slate, whether it be with Pinocchio rising for the first time and then learning how to become a real boy from all the temptations of, whether it be with Honest John or with Lampwick or with Stromboli, or if we go into Bambi where he's born into the world and then he becomes this naive fawn and then eventually he grows up to being the prince of the forest. So, there's an arc right there. But yeah, I would have to agree with you. I think that Snow White is probably the character that symbolizes the particular era. I mean, without Snow White, we wouldn't even have all the Disney films that we have today. All right, so let's go over to the next question. Favorite sidekick slash companion. Now, this is going to be difficult because you may argue that we have the dwarves. We have Timothy Mouse from Dumbo. We have Jiminy Cricket. And we have several characters from Bambi. We have like Thumper and we have Flower, Feline. So yeah, out of all of them, who's your favorite?
Yeah, that is a difficult choice, and of course, I could go the same easy route that I did with the first question, and basically go with Jiminy Cricket himself, who probably was maybe the original true sidekick of the Disney films. But if you're talking about favorites, I just can't help but love Timothy myself from Dumbo. Just the attitude he has, not just it's maybe it's just the fact even especially in my later years to look back at someone who was the only person out there outside of the mother of Mrs. Jumbo herself, was especially the only person left there once Dumbo at least temporarily lost his mother, who was there to stand by him and was the only person who looked at for the creature he was inside and would not stop believing in him and was not afraid to stand up for him against anyone, be it the other elephants or the crows themselves. It's Timothy may be out, not just out of the Golden Age films, but maybe the entire Disney library. Timothy might actually embody everything of the very type of best friend that almost every person really needs in their lives.
Yeah, I guess you could say that even though the Jiminy Cricket kind of started it, but at the same time, he wasn't like, buddy buddies with Pinocchio. He was his conscience. It was his job for him to, make sure that Pinocchio wasn't going to, stray away from being a good boy. Well, as for Timothy, I mean, he wasn't, demanded, or he wasn't like assigned to help out Dumbo. He just did it out of the kindness of his heart.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's actually a really good choice. Because of that, I might actually have to agree with you. I mean, not to say anything about the dwarves, but each of them have like their distinct personalities. And I would say out of all of them, at least Grumpy probably has like the biggest like arc where he starts off like really mad and he doesn't want Snow White around because he doesn't trust her. And then he starts warming up to her. I mean, even still to this day, I still see people like walking around with like Snow White t-shirts and they all have Grumpy in it because that's like the most developed out of the dwarves. But yeah, I would say for Timothy, I think that you nailed it, because with Timothy, I think that he's like the prime example of that companion, that best friend that is never going to leave your side and who's going to be able to stand up to all the adversaries that is around you. So I think that's a great one. Now, antagonist. Now, this is an interesting one because the golden era had their fair share of antagonists. You have the Wicked Queen from Snow White. You have several of the bad guys from Pinocchio, whether you want to count Stromboli, Honest John and Gideon, the Coachman, Monstro the Whale. I guess several of them from Fantasia, if you want to count those as well, whether it be Chernabog or whether it be with various of the other villains. And then there's also with Bambi, where the main villain is Man, or if you want to count Rano in there in that scene in the movie, you could. So yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one. So yeah, what do you think?
I would have to start and say that probably the Golden Age era may have the absolute best lineup of villains of all the other eras, especially when you look at the fact that if the objective of the antagonist, there's two ways you look at an antagonist: either hate them or fear them, or maybe sometimes both in some cases. The Golden Age may have been the best crop of antagonists that most people feared, especially if you're watching this as a young kid. Mm-hmm. With that being said, when it comes down to it, I have to go with the one antagonist that scared me so much as a kid that to this day I really can't watch that particular movie when that antagonist appears, and that is in fact Chernabog himself from Night on Bald Mountain in the climactic final cut of Fantasia. The first time I saw it wasn't actually in the actual movie Fantasia itself. It was actually when they rebroadcast that particular scene on the Disney Halloween special that aired several frequently during this month in the 1980s. And that's when I finally got to see Fantasia in a re-release in theaters. I guess like part of me was kind of fearing when that scene was happening, and I'm not gonna lie. When it finally came, I walked out of the theater. Wow. It was one that, look, I'm not afraid to basically disclose when I was afraid. Let's just put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, you essentially are staring literally at the devil, and it embodies the devil itself, whether it be with its presence, surrounded by fire, surrounded by minions. And the only way that it can be defeated was with people singing Ave Maria. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people still remember Chernabog for a reason. It's been referenced in a lot of other Disney TV shows. It's a major antagonist in Kingdom Hearts. So, yeah, it's iconic for a reason. So yeah, I mean, sure, we have the Wicked Queen, and she would be like the leading point of a lot of Disney antagonists, where we have a lot of, we have a lot of witches and we have a lot of magic users, whether it be with some of the villains we're going to be talking about later on. So yeah, it's difficult. I mean,
keep this in mind. Actually, the more I remember it, there's actually two antagonists from this same era that to this day I have trouble still watching because just how much they scare me. One, of course, was Chernabog. The other was Monstro the Whale.
Oh yeah,
from Pinocchio. That's another scene that to this day I have severe reservations rewatching even at my old age.
Yeah, and a lot of people say that Jaws is the movie that prevented, made people not go into the water. But yeah, this is really difficult because I mean, at the one hand, I do agree about with Chernabog, but at the other hand, the Wicked Queen from Snow White would be like like the basis for a lot of like, witches and magic users that we would see throughout the course of the few decades. And she's also an iconic character herself. And you have like a lot of major elements that still make her iconic, whether it be with her beautiful look or when she turns into the hag. She uses the poison apple, and the poison apple itself is already like a iconic fixture into Snow White. So yeah, this is really difficult. I mean, do we want to choose like something that like really genuinely scared us, that is based off of like a real, you know like something that really frightened us when we were children, in which like it's this big powerful force? Or do we like go into like an iconography that would like follow up into the course of the decades? So yeah, this is difficult. I mean, I guess, objectively that Chernabog would be like the best villain. And yes, that's true. I guess iconic wise, the Queen would, but if I had to choose like an antagonist, I'm probably gonna have to choose the Queen because she has an arc to her. Like we do see her where she's like really, really jealous of Snow White, and we get to see the peaks that she's able to do to get rid of her, sending the huntsman to kill her. And then we have finding out that it didn't work out, so she decides to disguise herself. Then she decides that she's going to get the poison apple, and she's going to kill off Snow White, and she does succeed in a way. I mean, it just turns out that they have that loophole about like love's first kiss was going to break the spell. But yeah, I think that we see that arc, and then we get to see the way that she dies. I mean, like, again, this is a classic thing that we see in a lot of, Disney movies that would follow up throughout the course of even today, where we get to see like the climactic fight against the adversary and about their amazing death that they were able to go off on. And not to say that Chernabog doesn't have that same thing either, that it embodies pure evil, but it's only a part of a major segment out of many segments in Fantasia. And I think that with the Wicked Queen, it was able to become the basis of what we would see later on. So that's what I chose.
This is definitely this is definitely a case, especially for this particular era, where there really isn't any wrong answer here.
Absolutely not. Right. All right, now number 4, what was the best setting? Now, each of them have their own distinct settings, and they all look really distinctly different. I mean, you have Snow White, where, some people say that based off the Brothers Grimm, it takes place in Germany. With Pinocchio, written by Carlo Caldoni, it takes place in Italy. Fantasia has like a whole bunch of different segments. I believe that Dumbo may have taken place in America. And then Bambi, I'm not 100% sure where it's from, but it takes place in the forest. So yeah, which of these films was able to take advantage of the setting?
Yeah, for me, part of me, what I think about, part of me, the ugly American in me, would love to have eventually pick just about any of the few of these Disney movies that take place in the States. And that's why at first I thought I might have selected Dumbo, which, yes, apparently does actually take place in Florida of all locations. But the more I think about it, for the setting that, because the setting is, for all intents, almost a character in of itself within the movie, I think I may have to go with the forest in Bambi, which I think it does take place in America as well.
Okay,
whatever that's worth. So, but yeah, the more I think about it, the forest itself is almost its own character in that film, and the way that all of the other characters interact within it. So that's a rare situation where perhaps that does work as well.
That is a great answer, by the way. I didn't even think about that. The fact that we know about this forest because all the animals live there. We get to see, the changes from spring, summer, fall, and winter. We get to see it burn into a fire and then eventually everything starts growing back. That's a great, great observation. Because I was thinking along the lines of what do we get to, take advantage of seeing a lot of? And sure, with with Snow White, we got to see, the castle and the forest and then the dwarf's house and the mines. I think that Pinocchio was able to take advantage of its setting where we get to see various locations. I really like the village. I like Geppetto's little house. I liked Pleasure Island. I liked Stromboli's theater. I liked the ocean. So I really like the way that they were able to play off with different settings and different locations to keep things really interesting. So yeah, I mean, I really love your take on the forest from Bambi, but if that's going to be really tough. But I think that in terms of variety, I'm going to choose Pinocchio's setting.
Mhm.
All right, this is another difficult one. Best art style slash animation. This is hard.
Well, to be perfectly honest, the more I think about it, isn't that difficult for me because if there's one movie where I think that especially Walt himself looked to take the animation to an extremely whole other level than what was compared to before, I think it's got to be Bambi. It goes back to just the artistic description of again the forest itself and how the art design of the setting and the forest helped contribute to what I was saying earlier about transforming and making the forest almost its own character.
Yeah, that's really difficult for me because I once listened to an episode of the Animated Anarchy podcast where the hosts Andrew and Michael went in depth about the animation of Pinocchio, where after they learned from their experiences working on Snow White, they wanted to take it to the next level with Pinocchio, and they learned a lot of new techniques that would carry on throughout the course of basically even to today, where we have like a mixture between old and new techniques. They were able to like learn how to make things like water and how the effects were. They were able to make different weather patterns. They were able to make a lot of things that wasn't even possible when they were doing Snow White. But at the same time, Bambi also looks fantastic even to this day. You have the trees, you have the huge large scopes and settings, and you also have each of the characters which are wonderfully animated and detailed, and also with the fact that it also has the distinct honor of being like the first coming of age story where we get to see the characters grow and we get to see like a different variety of how the characters look like from what we've seen before. So yeah, this is difficult, whether it be between Pinocchio, which kind of like started off with incorporating new animation techniques that is mind blowing, but at the same time, Bambi, which is amazing to look at even to this day, where they were able to change around some of the scenery. So, this is difficult. So, I'm gonna have to say in terms of like the best art style slash animation, yeah, I'm gonna have to say Bambi. Yeah, you're right, because I think that everything that they were able to learn from Pinocchio and then later on with Dumbo and all the other movies, they were able to incorporate it into Bambi very, very well. And this will be the last movie that would be around when it was the last movie during the golden era, and then we would go over to the wartime era where of course things had to be shortened down to more simple animation because it was World War II and a lot of the Disney animators were out were out and fighting, or some of them had to be stationed somewhere else. So yeah, we'll talk about that in just a moment. So okay, next one, which had the best song slash soundtrack?
I mean, this is actually another one that actually, when you really look at it, wasn't too difficult for me to guess because but if there's one, maybe if there's one movie, again, in just the entire history of Disney's lineup, that where the soundtrack is the film, it's Fantasia.
Yes.
Yes, there's a lot of interesting characters we do get to see throughout the film, but that has to be the one movie where the music itself is what is driving the film from beginning to end, more than just about any other creation. Maybe not just in Disney history, but maybe the entire history of cinema, period.
Right. Yeah. I mean, music is the core, is basically what drives this story together. There's no dialogue. It's just the music that is telling you the story. It's telling you how you should feel. It's telling you what's going on in the plot. I mean, sure, we have like all of the animation where you get to see it all convey, but it's the music that's carrying the entire thing. So, yes, I would say that as a soundtrack, yes, Fantasia is the best one. But I would say that as for the best song in this particular era, it has to be Wish Upon a Star from Pinocchio. It is the Disney song. Even still to this day, in every Disney movie, it opens up to When You Wish Upon a Star. The star itself is an iconic piece of Disney history. We're going to get an entire movie based off of that star alone. So I would say soundtrack, Fantasia. Song, Pinocchio. So that's what I would say. All right, next one, best story.
Yeah, well, again, it has to go back to just for my own personal preference, especially again looking looking back on my own life. If there's one story, particularly from this era, that I think just resonate with myself and maybe another lot of people, for anyone who basically had trouble fitting in, and it's basically an entire story of learning to believe in yourself. I mean, I gotta go with Dumbo in this particular era. Again, this is my own personal bias from realizing just how much, again, that can hit with anyone who had trouble fitting in and needing to find that one special part about them that can make them into something.
Right. Yeah. I remember a long time ago where somebody was making like this long chain of tweets where they were discussing about that, Dumbo is, the greatest Disney movie of all time because of, multiple reasons, whether it because of the character, whether it because of the songs, whether it because of the setting, or whether because of the way that they were able to implement the life lessons into something that anybody can relate to. I think that that person who wrote all of those tweets, first of all, major shout out to you for dedicating all of that time to do it. I think he was like a I don't know, like I think he was maybe like an animator or a professor of animation or something like that. But yeah, I forgot what his name is, but shout out to the person who wrote that. But yeah, that really opened my eyes for the first time about how much of an impact that Dumbo story is, even though that for the most part it's a very basic story. Now, as for me, on my take on what my favorite story is, again, this is very difficult because, I mean, yes, it's true that, we have more complex story in today's time, but in terms of like what the golden era was able to give us, I mean, I'm personally a huge fan of coming of age stories where we get to see characters progress to where they are now. So I really like Bambi's story, even though that, it would be more complex with other Disney movies later on. But I personally think from seeing him grow up from being a young, innocent fawn to being the prince of the forest, who is the protector and fighting off for his love and wanting to make sure that the animals are safe and, going through a major traumatic story with, the loss of his mother. I think that the story is still what captivates people even to this day with Bambi. So I'm going to say that in my opinion, Bambi might have the best story.
Perhaps.
All right, then. So, yeah, let's go over to our next question. Now, this is an interesting one again, because it's kind of hard to say about which one is the best in this one. So, yeah, which film made the biggest impact?
Well, again, to me, I don't know if this is a very difficult one, because I don't know if there's any, again, if there's one film, especially from Disney's lineup, that had the biggest impact, not just within Disney itself, but again, the entire history of film altogether. You got to look at Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. We are talking about the first ever full-length feature animated film in the history of cinema. I mean, you really can't get much more of an impact than that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah, without Snow White, we wouldn't have the Disney films that we have today. Snow White was the one that laid off everything. I mean, it was kind of hard to believe that many people thought that this was going to be a disaster. It's like, oh, there's no such thing as an animated full-length film. We should just stick to having just, 5 to 7 minute shorts. And, Disney was the one who proved them wrong, saying, no, it can be done. And it is possible for you to be fully invested in a story like this. There are so many amazing documentaries about the making of Snow White that I highly recommend that you watch. And yeah, it won an Oscar. And it's a very unique one because it's a big Oscar with 7 little Oscars. Go look it up on online. It's a really cool looking Oscar. But yeah, I agree that this film made the biggest impact because of what it was able to deliver. All right, now this is an interesting one. Which of the 5 films during the golden era is overlooked or underrated?
Yeah, this probably might be the most difficult one to go on because really nowadays almost every film from the golden age is highly beloved by most people. So what you will almost have to do here is look back as to which film probably was not as received as well as it should have been when it was first released. And in that case, there were quite a few films from this particular era that were not well received upon their original release. That having been said, I think that we look at what was probably the most overlooked of that time upon its release, probably once again was Fantasia. That was the one where Walt really tried to be. It was probably one of the most experimental of films of maybe even Walt's entire career, especially within that golden age itself. And it did unfortunately suffer, particularly because, as my own research would indicate, a lot of theaters of that time did not have the equipment and technology to completely utilize the type of sound technology that was developed for that particular movie. And that, with that case, probably a lot of moviegoers missed out on the full immersion of what that movie was supposed to be. And that's probably why it didn't receive the recognition it deserved until many years later.
Yeah, there were supposed to be a lot more sequels to Fantasia, but unfortunately, due to the fact that it underperformed, I mean, it didn't it made its money, but it wasn't like a massive hit that they were hoping it was going to be. So yeah, they unfortunately it wasn't until Fantasia 2000 in which we got in the proper sequel to Fantasia, even though that you could argue that the wartime era was essentially like trying to be Fantasia light, but we'll get to that later. So, yeah, I would say that in terms of underrated, yeah, I do agree. It's Fantasia because it was a film that was so different in terms of like what studios were doing at the time. I mean, you had Disney and you had Fleischer, and they were doing like traditional classic stories, whether it be with Snow White with the Brothers Grimm, or whether it be Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. So, there were basically like book adaptations. But then you have Fantasia. It's like, we're going to do basically orchestra in animated form. That's something even to this day is very unique. And yeah, because of a lot of factors, it didn't really gain a lot of recognition from a lot of people until many decades later when it was, re-released in theaters, and then eventually when it came out on VHS, and then eventually Fantasia 2000 came out. So yeah, I would say that it was a movie that was now considered to be a classic, but it took a long time for that to happen. But yeah, I do agree. Fantasia out of the Disney golden era is definitely the most overlooked. Even though that the iconography of Mickey during The Sorcerer's Apprentice is probably like one of the most iconic features in any Disney property ever. All right, and finally, our last one for the golden era, our personal favorite out of the 5.
Yeah, for me, once again, it just goes back to that one film that seemed to have the type of story and main character whose struggles just could resonate with myself and so many other people in our particular area. It goes back to Dumbo. It's just that one that I think there are just so many people out there that can so identify with the struggles that someone like Dumbo went through. And I think that's why they get back. Well, every time they watch it, there might be the one character that you want to see succeed just more than just about anybody else. And it's just it's the entire immersion. Obviously, ironically, it's the fact that I believe that is the shortest Disney feature film ever made. But even in that small runtime, it conveys just so much emotion and identification, almost, if that's the correct word to say about it. It's just that's the one story that I think I could keep coming back to. I'll even endure the absolute insanity that is the pink elephant scene, just to get through, just to watch that type of story arc that a character like that goes through, that I think that just so many people can identify with.
Yeah, this is a hard one for me because I love all of these films for different reasons. In terms of my personal favorites, I mean, I remember when I first saw all of these films as a kid. I would say that the one that I saw probably the most out of all of them was probably Snow White, because my sister and we were really into like all the Disney princesses movies at the time. So I take it in terms of that. That'll probably be like something that's really close to my heart. But I mean, it's difficult because I mean, like, I really do enjoy Pinocchio. I really do enjoy Dumbo and Fantasia, and I really do enjoy Bambi. But yeah, I would say that, due to a lot of my fond memories, I would say that Snow White might be my personal favorite of that particular era. All right, let's go over to the next era. And I think this is one that's not going to last for very long. It's the wartime era. So, for those who didn't tune into our podcast from almost a year ago, we talked about the six films, which were Saludos Amigos, The Three Caballeros, Make Mine Music, Fun and Fancy Free Melody Time, and The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Now, as mentioned earlier, a lot of these films were essentially like either two short films that were combined into one, or Saludos Amigos case, which is a 43-minute documentary about the Disney animators going over to South America and drawing based off of their experiences. But yeah, for the most part, a lot of these are like little vignettes of short music videos that were cobbled together, especially since this was around during World War II. So, yeah, I think that this is probably not going to be very long because it's kind of hard to answer all of these questions in terms of like protagonist and companion and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, let's get to that. So, favorite protagonist during the wartime era. This is going to be
for me again, like there's so many quote unquote protagonists in this era, just because the fact that all of the most of the films were vignettes themselves with their own individual stories. That being said, if we look back, I think the one protagonist I probably had the most fun watching, it's probably going to be Mr. Toad.
I agree. I agree 100%. It's probably Mr. Toad because, like I told you in that last podcast, I had never seen any of the Disney wartime era films until just recently. So when I saw The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad literally for the first time, I was just so genuinely surprised about how much I enjoyed that movie. And Mr. Toad was a riot. The fact that he was so into like the latest fad and trend that he was able to just wreck his entire life and sell Toad Hall and basically almost just like get his friends into a heap of trouble just so that he can be able to get a motor car. That is hilarious. And I do agree that out of all the characters, Mr. Toad is probably like the best protagonist in that particular era. All right, favorite sidekick slash companion.
And there's some good ones too in this one as well. In fact, even thinking about Mr. Toad, I could have just gone the same route and picked someone like Cyril the Horse as well. That being said, there's not just one, but a couple of guys that I can't help but always remember fondly when it comes to this era, and that is Jose and Panchito.
I agree 100%. I agree. Jose and Panchito are the essential companions to Donald in Three Caballeros. And like I said before, it's a surprise that Panchito has his only appearance in this film because afterwards they use the Arucan bird. And Jose has been in 3 out of the 6 of the wartime era films. And, he first appeared in Saludos Amigos. Then he came into Three Caballeros. And then eventually he would spin off into, the next movie. I think it was, Make Mine Music or Fun and Fancy Free. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, it was, I think that, the fact that he was able to, have more staying power than Pachito, but yet at the same time, when you think of companions, you think of the two companions from the Three Caballeros, which are Jose and Panchito. So yeah, I do agree 100%.
Here's all you need to know about it. First off, probably one of my favorite episodes of the revived DuckTales series is the episode when those two are reunited with Donald in there. And the second one is the fact that once I found out there was even an issue of the Donald Duck comics. There was, and this was from the Don Rosa era instead of the Carl Barks era. But I found out there was one that reunited the Three Caballeros. I knew I had to get my hands on a copy of that particular comic. I think I had to order the Amazon Kindle version of it. But yeah, I had to make certain that I got my hands on that one as well. That is just how much of an impact those particular characters have had on me.
Yeah, not to mention that since our last discussion, they finally decided to bring back the Three Caballeros series on Disney Plus again. So I'm glad that they were able to do that. Yes.
I need to complete watching that for sure.
Yes, please watch it. It's actually really good. I'm just shocked that we weren't able to get this first, and then other countries like the Philippines and various other countries got it first before we did. So yeah, we had to fight to get that series. So yeah, I'm finally glad that we got it back on Disney Plus. Whoever decided to remove it, shame on you. All right, next one. Favorite antagonist.
This is gonna be one where, yeah, again, it's a difficult thing to go with because, again, so many different vignettes and stuff. I think this is gonna be the one where I'm going to pick the favorite antagonist just for how hilariously entertaining it was, and that's why I'm actually going to stay with the same movie and go with the Araquan bird in there, who basically was basically takes the place of Chippendale or the Bee as being Donald's antagonist within that entire movie. It just his absolute nutcase attitude is just something that, again, is just absolutely memorable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is I would say yes. He is a very memorable character in terms of just causing just chaos. I mean, I even said it that he's almost like Woody Woodpecker, except that he's in a Disney in a Disney feature. Yeah, as for antagonist, I mean, I guess the closest true antagonist from this particular era would have to be the Headless Horseman from The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Just the fact that he's able to accentuate fear, and the fact that he was able to have that menacing laugh, and he was able to chase Ichabod around, and we never see Ichabod again, so we don't know if he just like ran away in fear, or he disappeared, or he died. I mean, we don't know, and that just brings up an interesting mystery. And there's even an argument about, like, who is it? I mean, is it really Brom Bones? I mean, we don't know, and that's what brings the mystery that is really fascinating to me. So
I will say it's a very interesting situation where they never reveal who the Headless Horseman is, but even watching that thing as a kid, for me it was pretty obvious, right, who it very likely was. So it is kind of the funny thing about that particular film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, next one. Best art style / animation. Now, again, this is going to be pretty difficult considering about the situation that was happening at that time. So yeah, I mean, you have a mixture with like the classic animation, and then you have a lot of live action in here, especially with, films such as like Saludos Amigos and The Three Caballeros, in which they feature a lot of live action integrated into animation. So, and then of course you would go into the classic, traditional animation with the remaining films. So yeah, out of all of them, which one was the best?
I mean, I guess, yeah, it is a very difficult one to go on, especially looking back with how many different vignettes so many others have gone in. That being said, I think that probably the animation style of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, for me, probably did the best in setting up both the setting and the characters, was really played a huge part in that, and I think was very instrumental. I think that what gets me is that was probably, maybe even of all of them, it was probably the one movie that felt the most like a cartoon in and of itself, just with the actions of the characters and the stylizations of them with a guy like Ichabod Crane and his, let's just say, distinguished features, so to speak, in there. And that's one where the animation itself, I think, really played maybe the most part within the story itself, at least among all of the films of this particular era.
Yeah, I do agree. And especially since this was like years after World War II. So I'm sure that they were able to get some of their main animators back and they were able to integrate some of their best styles into the presentation of both, Ichabod and Mr. Toad. I forgot one of the questions, the best setting. I'm gonna have to answer, Ichabod and Mr. Toad because, with Ichabod, we were able to see, basically like, 18th century New England, and we were able to see, the houses, we were able to see the townspeople, the way that the clothes looked at the time, and the spookiness of the forest. So yeah, I would say that, I would, and then of course you have like the old timiness of Mr. Toad as well, where we get to see, everybody dressed up like, again, like looking very 19th century or early 20th century. And then you have Toad Hall, and then you have all the different locations that they were able to go to, whether it be with the different houses, whether it be with the courthouse, whether it be with the bar. So I would say that again, I would say for both best setting and best art style / animation, yeah, it would easily be Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Now, song / soundtrack. This is a difficult one because every single one of these films have music. I mean, I guess slightly not so much with Saludos Amigos because again, it was a documentary, but they did have some songs integrated, but for the most part, not really. So yeah, out of all of them, which one had the best song / soundtrack?
Yeah, again, this is a very extremely difficult one, and what gets to me like is the fact that it's almost impossible for me possibly to choose between obviously the two you would probably look at more than anything else is either Melody Time or Make Mine Music. And for me, that's almost impossible to choose because they split up so well. Like the fact that when I would have picked Melody Time because it includes Pecos Bill, which I thought had one of the best ones. But then I look at Make Mine Music, and they've got Casey at the bat.
Yeah.
On there. And I think almost because of those two cancel each other out. And I got to end up going once again with the Three Caballeros. Yeah. And especially its particular theme song in of itself. That is probably the one song individually that has remained timeless throughout Disney's entire history. I mean, I've been, just keep in mind, the handful of times I've been back to the Disney parks in recent years with some of the parades they hold, they keep the Three Caballeros and that particular song in there in quite a few of those parades. That's about all you need to know.
That is true, yeah. And some of the shorts are still beloved even to this day, whether it be with the Flying Gauchito, whether it be with the Cold-Blooded Penguin, whether it be with Baja, or whether it be with, with singing about Mexico, whether it be with You Belong With My Heart. I think that those songs are still within the test of time of why that film is still beloved. I mean, besides, the three characters, of course. And of course, with, featuring a lot of, fantastic performers from various singers, whether it be with Dora Luz or Carmen Molina or Aurora Miranda, again, no relation, but yeah, I think that Three Caballeros does have a lot of great music. And yeah, and like I mentioned in the last podcast, I would say that Make Mine Music and Melody Time, they're very split down the middle in terms of their songs. Some are clearly better than others. But yeah, it's kind of hard to decide on which one had the definitive best soundtrack. But like you said, Three Caballeros is still iconic for a reason, so I would have to go with that. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Now best story. I don't think there's a question on which one has the best story.
Yeah, I mean, especially for even as spooky as it can be, I individually go with the story of Ichabod Crane, the adaptation of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow itself. Probably the most was probably maybe the most complete story that that was involved in this particular era, with Mr. Toad probably being number 2 in that situation.
Yeah, I do agree. Yeah, I would say that Ichabod Crane is definitely the best story, and then Mr. Toad is number 2. Everything else just doesn't compare. All right, biggest impact.
Yeah, I was trying to think about what exactly would cause the most impact, and when I think about, the more I think about just the fact that it's probably the only one that was replayed the most in the years since. I think we probably got to stick with Ichabod and Mr. Toad here.
Yep, I agree.
And,
yep. Yeah, Ichabod and Mr. Toad is the one that had the biggest impact. I mean, I would say that Three Caballeros is a close second because of the iconography with Donald, Jose, and Panchito.
It is true.
But I mean, at the same time, Ichabod and Mr. Toad is still a fantastic story and the most complete out of the entire package that was able to come out during this era. So it's difficult. I mean, yeah, I'm gonna have to say, yeah, Ichabod and Mr. Toad, even though that Three Caballeros is a close second.
Okay. And I'm guessing we'll just go. Before I just cut to the chase, we're probably both going to say that Ichabod and Mr. Toad is probably both our favorite film from this particular era, correct?
Yes, 100% yes. Okay, but okay. I guess because we already answered the last one, I guess we'll just conclude it with the penultimate one, which is, which of the films do we feel is the most underlooked or underrated?
That could be a very challenging one.
It is challenging.
Keep in mind that I don't think I've ever seen Saludos Amigos, so I can't even comment on that.
Okay.
That having been said, maybe the most underappreciated might be Fun and Fancy Free.
Okay.
I might think, just because of the fact that I think a lot of people might know, of course, one particular vignette that was in that one, and that, of course, is Mickey and the Beanstalk. But probably not a lot of people know that it's that particular film that short originated in. And in that sense, perhaps that film doesn't get the credit it just deserves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is difficult because I'm trying to think about which do I feel is like really underrated, because I mean, I would say that in terms of like some of the best that was able to be featured during the wartime era that people don't seem to really appreciate. I mean, Fun and Fancy Free is a really good one as well because they do feature Mickey and the Beanstalk. But at the same time, you have to go through Bongo. And I'm sorry, I did not really care for Bongo. Melody Time is a pretty good one. I personally feel that it's a little bit better than, say, Make Mine Music. I think that Melody Time was able to get some of the elements of Fantasia and make some of the stories a little bit better. I really enjoy The Legend of Johnny Appleseed, Little Toot, Blame It on the Samba, and Pecos Bill. I really felt that those are really, really great stories. And then with Make Mine Music, I did enjoy some of them. I really did, enjoy Casey at the Bat and Peter and the Wolf and The Whale Who Wanted to Sing at the Met. I thought that those were great shorts. So yeah, that it's really difficult about which of those would I feel that is really underrated and overlooked. I mean, I guess those two, I mean, if you were to take a look at those individual shorts, I would say definitely do check them out. But as like a whole package, it's kind of difficult to recommend, like I said in the last podcast. Mm-hmm. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go over to the Silver Era. Now, this is going to be really fun, considering that it was able to bring back to basics of everything that we love from the Golden Era, and it was able to incorporate a lot more of the cinematics that we would expect, and it would become probably for a lot of people, and I've even seen this in the comments over the years, they consider the Silver Era to be one of the best of the eras from Disney, even right alongside with the Renaissance era. So I can see that because a lot of the quintessential classic Disney films started right here. Now, for those who are wondering about the Silver Era, this was from the early 50s to the late 60s. So we have Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians, The Sword in the Stone, and The Jungle Book. So yeah, let's start things off. Favorite protagonist from this era?
Well, I'm going to admit that we've been doing this a few years earlier. Probably my no doubt pick for this probably would have been Alice from Alice in Wonderland. That having been said, as these years have gone by, there's one particular protagonist that I have come to develop a whole lot more respect for, that I think probably does not get the respect that this character really deserves, and that would be Cinderella. The more I look at this character, the more I think about it, I think that Cinderella just gets an incredibly bad rap too much.
I agree.
They consider her one of the weakest princesses, at least compared to what we would get in later years, particularly with the Renaissance era. Keep in mind, there are only like 3 official Disney princesses, I think, that came prior to the Renaissance era. Don't hold me to that exactly, but just the fact that Cinderella's main strength is her heart and her kindness. And the more I think about in life, how compassion and kindness are really, really underappreciated and underrated in our own world. The fact that despite everything that she goes through her entire life, she still tries as hard as possible to see the good in anyone and everything. Cinderella has become, at the very least, especially one of my favorite princesses of all time. Maybe at the very least, probably a close second behind Jasmine, perhaps in that regard.
Yeah, again, this is really difficult because I probably would have said Alice as well, because I do really relate to the fact that she's just so confused and curious about the land that she just landed in, with observing Wonderland for the first time, and she's just getting curiouser and curiouser, and just like being the straight man to all the wackiness, and she's supposed to be the person that you're supposed to relate to. So yeah, I would say that conceptually she might be one of the best out of the era, but yeah, I do agree that Cinderella is fantastic because she was able to bring back the Disney princess, and because of her kindness and because of her generosity towards others, and the fact that she is so patient and having to deal with her awful stepmother and stepsisters, she has this resilience. It's like, she's able to take years and years of abuse from her step family. After her father died, she had nobody left. And the fact that she was able to stick around all this time to taking care of them, even though that she could have left a long time ago, she still stuck through. And the fact that she was finally able to, get all of her dreams come true because, of her goodness and her sweetness. And finally, she was able to, charm the prince, and he just couldn't stop thinking about her. And then finally, when they were able to, reunite with each other, we finally get to see the happily ever after that Cinderella deserves. So yeah, I do agree that out of the protagonists, she's definitely probably, the best from this era. I do agree. All right, so we go over to the next one. So sidekick / companion.
Now, this one is absolutely a no-brainer for me, because this is not just my favorite sidekick character from this particular era. This would have been my choice if we had just done all of them together. This would is hands down favorite sidekick character of the entire Disney library. Now, to set this up, anyone who knows me knows that I am a sarcastic jackass. And there are a handful of characters through my childhood that more or less caused me to embrace that style. There is Garfield, there is Alf, there is Oscar the Grouch, and then there is that lovable, blue-wearing pudge ball of snark herself, Merryweather.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say this. Yeah, I would say that the 3 fairies do definitely have that personality that really shines on Sleeping Beauty. I mean, they are the ones who are essentially like the protagonists of the entire film, because Sleeping Beauty sleeps through like 2/3 of the film afterwards. So you could say that they're the heroes of the entire thing. But yeah,
for more on this, I still want my Sleeping Beauty mid-quel TV series.
That would be great. Please deliver it to us. Yeah, this is difficult because there are a lot of sidekick / companions. I mean, Cinderella has a ton of them. She has the mice. Alice in Wonderland, I guess there's several of them, whether it be with the White Rabbit, the March Hare, the Mad Hatter. Peter Pan has Tinkerbell. Lady and the Tramp, I guess you could say maybe Jacques and Trusty, but they're not really in the film that much. Sleeping Beauty, you have the Three Fairies. 101 Dalmatians. I mean, I guess you could say maybe it could be like some of the side characters, like maybe, the sergeant or the colonel or the captain, but they're not in the movie that much. And then when you have like the Sword and the Stone, you have Merlin, or you could argue Wart is the companion, whichever you prefer. And then Jungle Book, you have Bagheera and Baloo. So again, this is really, really difficult. I mean, Tinkerbell is the iconic Disney character companion. I mean, like I said, I mean, with Wish Upon a Star showing up in every single Disney film, Tinkerbell again shows up in every single opening of a Disney film, whether it be with the opening of like the Wonderful World of Disney, whether it be with the intro of every Disney film. I mean, Tinkerbell even had her own series of films that were released direct to video after John Lasseter pulled the plug on no more direct-to-video Disney films. So, yeah, I mean, I would say that because of that, Tinkerbell would have to be my choice. She has that same snarkiness, and yet at the same time, she has that heart of gold and caring for Peter. I do love Merryweather. I mean, that is a great choice, but I would say that in a combination of that plus the iconography, Tinkerbell is my choice. All right, so favorite antagonist. This is a no-brainer for me, but I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I have a good feeling what that no-brainer was. It's the pick most people would go with here. That having been said, there's something else. When you take that one out, I'm gonna go against the grain here. When you take that one particular character out, the rest of the Silver Age movies might have the best crop of just most. Obviously, the one you're picking is probably the most, let's say, the most frightening of antagonists. But most of the other movies probably have some of the most entertaining antagonists. You have the Queen of Hearts. You have Captain Hook. You have the villains from the Jungle Book like Shere Khan. But I am going to go with the one that just is so entertaining for me to watch every single time, and that is the magnificent, marvelous, Madam Mim.
Oh wow, that's a really interesting choice. Yeah, Madam Mim is definitely like the crazy one. Even though that she only shows up in one scene of Sword in the Stone, she is just absolutely crazy, and she just exudes insanity. That scene with her and Merlin is probably the best scene in the entire movie. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure that again, would be for a lot, in terms of purposes, one of the main reasons why people would choose Madam Mim as like one of the best Disney villains out there. I mean, it's even still to this day, from what I hear, Japan loves Madam Mim. And yeah, I would say that she is a great character. Now, as for me, I mean, you have Lady Tremaine, you have the Queen of Hearts, you have Shere Khan, you have Captain Hook, you have Maleficent, you have Cruella de Vil. Like, this is difficult because every single one of these villains are iconic for a reason. I mean, Lady Tremaine just exudes just awfulness and evilness. I mean, she is a more realistic villain, where she is this stepmother to, Cinderella, where she's just constantly abusing her, and she's willing to prevent her from going to the ball and possibly maybe finding the man of her dreams, and she wants nothing more than her daughters to get it. In Cinderella 3, she was able to take the wand from the fairy godmother and retroactively make sure that the entire first year of Cinderella and the prince together from Cinderella 2 never happened. And instead, Anastasia was the one who got the slipper fit, and she was able to play off into, preventing Cinderella from finding Lady Tremaine to take the wand and reverse everything back to normal. She was so quick on her feet and one step ahead of everything. And then, of course, you have Maleficent, which, a lot of people say is one of the more iconic Disney villains of all time, where, she was, menacing, and she was evil, and, she wanted nothing more than to get revenge on the king and queen because she wasn't invited over to the birth of Aurora. And so she decided to cast that spell to, make sure that she died when she pricked her finger on the spinning wheel. And then you have Cruella de Vil, who wants to kill Puppy so she can make a fur coat. Like, wow. And then Shere Khan, again, even though that he's not in the movie as much, but you have that sense of momentum where everybody is fearing him. And then when you finally get to see him in action, it's like, yeah, Mowgli, you have no chance in fighting him. Run. So yeah, every single one of these villains are amazing. As for which one is the best is really, really difficult. Oh boy. I would say that I do agree that Maleficent does carry that, essence of fear, especially when she turns into the dragon at the end of the film. But her motivation is like she wasn't invited over to the birth of a princess, so that is a little bit like a little bit of her fault here in terms of like trying to like put her into the pedestal of like really bad villains. I mean, I really love Cruella de Vil. I really thought that she was just a hilarious villain, but at the same time, just exuberated such awfulness. I mean, like killing puppies for a fur coat is genuinely awful. And at the same time, she just exudes that personality. So, yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to, but at the same time, you have Lady Tremaine, who, if you were to take like the sequels into canon, which is debatable, I mean, she was able to be one step ahead of everything. So, yeah, I would say that in terms of like memorability and and that sense of entertainment yet villainous, my choice is Cruella de Vil.
We may have to, or at least declare here that probably the Silver Age probably had the best crop of villains, maybe of in any of the Disney eras of all time.
Yeah, it's really difficult to choose which one is objectively the best because they're all great. Yeah, I mean, because every single one of them was able to deliver something, whether it be with the Queen of Hearts, with just being like really genuinely awful. The fact that if she doesn't get any, if she's like angry at just like the minute details, she'll have, their, heads being chopped off. That is genuinely scary. And then you have Captain Hook, who again wants to take revenge on Peter because he got his hand cut and was fed to the crocodile. But yeah, he's a very hammy villain, played wonderfully by Hans Conried. But at the same time, you understand the motivation on why Captain Hook is so angry, because Peter was being just a jerk for cutting off his hand and feeding it to the crocodile in the first place. But, he's just so wonderfully entertaining. And yeah, I mean, Lady and the Tramp doesn't really have too much of a villain per se. I mean, sure, you have that rat from like the beginning of the movie that shows up toward the end, but again, it's not really much of like antagonist in this movie. So I'm not really going to count that. Maleficent is fantastic. Again, she has that great sense of presence, and she would be featured predominantly in the Kingdom Hearts franchise. And yeah, Cruella de Vil was the same. Mad Madam Mim, not so much. I mean, it's I understand, the consensus of Sword in the Stone, but like I said, I think that Mad Madam Mim was probably like my highlight for that entire film. And then Shere Khan, again, a great iconic villain that deserves all the recognition that he gets. So yeah, you're right. I would say that this and the Golden Era has a set of fantastic villains that is really difficult to decide which one is debatably the best one. Now, this is an interesting one. So, best setting, because all of them have really unique settings. After being very limited towards like separate short music videos, we finally get the bigger scope of all of these different countries and all the different locations that they were able to go to. So, out of all of them, which one was your favorite?
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult. It can be a very difficult to choose from. I mean, you've got the Asian jungle of the Jungle Book. We have Arthurian England from the Sword and the Stone. You've got the typical fantasy setting of Sleeping Beauty. They even managed to fit in one movie taking place in the United States with Lady and the Tramp. You've got, of course, the fantasy setting of Peter Pan. That having been said, I still got to go with Wonderland here. That is just how absolutely bonkers and insane the entire setting is, and how Walt and the animators were able to perfectly show off how crazy that world can be.
I agree 100%. Alice in Wonderland has the best setting because it starts off very, very quaint. It starts off with this beautiful English countryside, and then when you're jumped right into Wonderland, anything can go wrong or right, or a mixture of both. You never know what's going to happen, whether it be with different colors, whether it be with complete darkness. it's just amazing of all the different variety that they were able to play with Wonderland. So yeah, I think that in terms of that, I do agree. It does have the best setting. Now, best art style slash animation.
Well, this one actually, again, nothing against the animation style of any of these films. I mean, they've always been about top notch for that most part. That having been said, there is one that I think definitely probably stands out above the rest because of how much effort they put in to trying to make it the absolute best. And for me, that's got to be Sleeping Beauty. I mean, this was a movie they took 9 years to make, supposedly because of how much effort they kept trying to put into this animation style. And I've had my issues with particularly the story itself with Sleeping Beauty, and yeah, probably about how ineffective the princess and prince themselves are within it themselves. But the animation is definitely the one thing that I think probably most people, it's the animation and Maleficent that basically I think most people remember about this particular movie. So it's got to be stand out for at least that much.
Yeah, not only that, but I think that the way that even the castle looked, it looks like a beautifully detailed glass painting. The fact that they were able to have like the different streaks of colors and the different angles that they were able to play across, and the wide scope, especially when you have Aurora and Prince Philip dancing for the first time. I think that they were able to not only play around with just that, but also with the different moods that they were able to have, whether it be with like the green when the fairies decided to put everybody to sleep, or whether it be with when Maleficent turned into a dragon for the first time. You get to see a lot of blacks and purples and greens and yellows, and then all of the different fairies have their distinct colors as well, whether it be with blue, pink, and green, and also with with the fact that they were able to have the colors show you how the characters are feeling, whether it be dark, whether it be really bright. So they were able to take advantage of that, and the fact that it took 9 years for them to do it, it really shows. I mean, I understand that a lot of people have their issues with the Xerox era of film, starting off with 101 Dalmatians, Sword in the Stone, and with the Jungle Book, and it would continue on towards the next like over 25 years until Little Mermaid was able to be the last one, and then finally they went over to the cap system. But yeah, I would say that with Sleeping Beauty, it was like the last true, beautifully detailed and colored animated film that we would get for several decades. So yeah, I do agree with you on that, Chris. All right. Now, this is an interesting one. Best song slash soundtrack.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely an interesting pick to go with. And this is probably one where everyone will have their own personal choice for favorites. Now, I would have loved to have picked the soundtrack from Alice in Wonderland, just on the fact that I think that Golden Afternoon might be the most underrated individual song in Disney's entire history. Of course, everyone remembers probably the soundtrack from Sleeping Beauty, which was heavily inspired by the Tchaikovsky musical adaptation of the story. Mm-hmm. That having been said, when I look at all these films and look at the one movie whose soundtrack resonated and just was maybe the most entertaining of all of the films combined, you gotta go with the Jungle Book as far as I'm concerned. I mean, just so many great numbers from the Bare Necessities, I Want to Be Like You. That thing, I just remember listening to Disney compilation albums that my parents got us back when we were kids, and just so many of songs from that movie were included on that thing that when you really look at it, this really was kind of a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I do agree. It's definitely like the most upbeat. It's definitely like the most catchy, and it's definitely like one that you can generally dance to. Like the previous ones, you couldn't really. I mean, maybe with a couple of them, but no, I would say that this is definitely one of like the earlier songs that you would play on your Spotify of like the classic Disney songs that would be released over and over and over again. I remember that this was featured in a lot of like Disney sing-alongs and also a Disney like cassette tapes or CDs where they would do like remix versions of it with like various other singers. So yeah, I think that the soundtrack of this is like really iconic. And this was actually like, I believe, one of the last, if not the last bit of music that the Sherman brothers were doing for Disney right before they left. And they were working on other films for other animation studios. And yeah, I mean, you could definitely tell that they were like putting their all into it. I mean, a lot of the music in The Jungle Book is fantastic. And of course, wonderfully performed by both Phil Harris and Louis Prima, who are just amazing lounge singers. Like the fact that they were able to bring in that style, which, it's kind of weird when you look at it conceptually. It's like, okay, you have this book that was written over several hundred years before they were making this movie, and it's based off of India. And you have like this swinging bear and a chimpanzee, which shouldn't really, I mean, not a chimpanzee, a orangutan, which shouldn't really be in India because they live in Borneo, which is in Indonesia. But you know what? I guess, the famous story about Walt Disney telling his writers and animators, don't read the Jungle Book. We're just going to make it for the fun of it. You can definitely tell that even with the music, they were just doing it just for the fun of it. And yeah, I would say that the music is still iconic even to this very day. And if I were to say like other music that should be like commendable for how iconic they are, I mean, everybody remembers Bella Notte from Lady and the Tramp. I think that for a lot of people, that scene alone is one of the most iconic featured in Disney. Everybody tries to replicate where Lady and the Tramp are eating the spaghetti together, and then they have that beautiful song that's playing in the in the background. I mean, that's also another really iconic piece of music. And then of course with a lot of others. I mean, A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes from Cinderella is also a really iconic one as well. A lot of covers for that one. Peter Pan's You Can Fly is also a really good one. And then you also have Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. That's also a really iconic one as well. But yeah, I would say a soundtrack is like one of the earlier depictions of like fantastic Disney songs. I would say that Jungle Book delivers in strides. Like it's almost like no comparison. All right, so best story.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of good stories in this thing. And I guess I could go against the grain here and probably go with something like The Sword and the Stone and how they managed to adapt the Arthurian legend and whatnot. But still, when I go back to it, I still gotta go with Cinderella here.
Yeah.
It is just one of the absolute most classic stories out there, not just from a fairy tale perspective, but of giving a story where, again, you have maybe a protagonist that you so want to root for, maybe more than just about anyone else of this, at least this particular era. It's just the one that so many people keep coming back to again and again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do agree. I think that even though that, if you were to look at it, Cinderella would probably be like the most simple out of all of them, because you have, afterwards was Alice in Wonderland, where it was just like really, really insane. And then Peter Pan was a little bit more adventurous. Lady and the Tramp, I would say, was a little bit more simpler, but it's a different type of it. Not more so classic fairy tales, but more along the lines of like early 1900s Americana. Sleeping Beauty, I mean, the story is just very lackluster in a lot of other places. It's not very consistent. 101 Dalmatians is pretty good too. Sword in the Stone, like I said, I'm sorry, Chris, but it's my least favorite out of this lineup. Jungle Book, again, didn't really stick close to the original source material, which, by the way, is a great book. I really wish that they would have stuck a little closer to it when it came out, but we have the live action remake to kind of retroactively help us with that. But yeah, I would say that Cinderella is still remembered still to this day for a reason. Even though the story itself is a classic fairy tale, it's a classic fairy tale told really, really well. So I do agree with that. All right, so the film that made the biggest impact. I mean, there's no question as to which one it is.
I mean, you gotta go with Cinderella.
Yes,
here,
of course you do.
Just from the fact that, again, that this was the film that more or less saved Disney's animation studio.
Yes.
I mean, they basically were throwing a Hail Mary to to use a football term, in producing this thing. You got to keep in mind here that 1950 was also the first year, if memory serves me correctly, that Disney released its first ever completely live action film with their first adaptation of Treasure Island. Mm-hmm. So they really were looking at the possibility that they may have to go on without animation, period. Because think about this was also the time when a lot of studios were shuttering their animation divisions, and Disney was the only one that was still regularly making full-length films within that medium. And so just the fact that it was every bit the smash hit they desperately needed it to be. It may have been probably there's 3 films that probably had most of an impact for Disney itself. One we'll get to later. The second was Snow White for obvious reasons, and the third probably has to be Cinderella.
Yes, I do agree. I mean, even still to this day, I mean, Cinderella is still huge in terms of her, of her presence. The Cinderella castle is up on Disney World. You have people even still dressing up as Cinderella to meet up with the character herself. We have, the Cinderella sequels and the live action remake, and, the fact that, Cinderella herself is such an iconic Disney princess, and the fact that Cinderella was the one that kind of like kickstarted the Silver Era. I mean, back when they were still releasing short films to, try to release stuff during World War II, Cinderella was the one that brought it back to basics. It was deemed as like the best film that Disney had ever released since Snow White, and had propped, Walt himself to do more animated films. So yeah, as for films that made the biggest impact, absolutely, this is the one. Now, the film that is overlooked and underrated, this is an interesting one.
Yeah, this is one where I think the two of us are going to have to agree to disagree on, because for me, it's a no-brainer. I think that The Sword and the Stone is one of the most underappreciated and gets a bad rap as far as it goes. This is one film that I still have a ton of fun watching. If this was in an era, I'll say it, if this film came out as an era separate from Sleeping Beauty, then probably my number one favorite sidekick from this era would be Archimedes, who again is just another one of those incredibly sarcastic, sharp-tongued characters that I just happen to just get a gas after. In fact, I'll say one of my favorite even miniature scenes in the history of Disney is Archimedes just completely losing his gourd and having a laughing fit at Merlin's experimental plane failing and crashing at it. It's just that one bit just still gets me guffawing and laughing to this day. And just some even more iconic characters like Madame Mim. Merlin to me is like probably one of the most favorite characters as well. And it's just one of those movies that for whatever reason you'll call it one of my guilty pleasures. I really just have always enjoyed this thing. It's among one of my favorites for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, I literally just saw it for the first time when we were doing that podcast together. So if I probably would have been introduced to it a lot earlier, I probably would have the same sentimental viewing of it as you do. But yeah, in terms of like underrated films from this particular era, it's pretty difficult because a lot of them have been iconic for one reason or another. But if I had to personally choose one that I feel that more people don't really discuss on why it's such a great film, I mean, I would say that as a whole, Alice in Wonderland is great because, some people say that, oh, it's just a really insane movie. And, what was he on when he wrote this film and, this adaptation? But yeah, I would say that out of the creativity and out of the little moments that it was able to come into this, I think that was able to, incorporate into why that it was such an amazing film. I mean, it's kind of difficult because a lot of these films during that era were really, really great. But I feel that Alice, I mean, sure, you see Alice in pieces, but you don't see it as like the whole package. And I understand because it's really difficult to see it as a whole package because it just goes all over the place. But I would say it's a wonderful experience. I mean, I guess I would say Lady and the Tramp as well. because it really just shows the progression that Lady goes through from being this pampered dog living in the suburban neighborhood and finally getting the experience of, being in the streets with this rambunctious dog who's just been this tramp all his life. And then you get to see like this love story that develops that, ordinarily probably wouldn't even happen. So again, that's pretty difficult, but I would say that Alice, in my opinion, I feel gets not as much recognition compared to all the others. I mean, sure, you have Peter Pan that was able to, broaden out so much iconography as well, whether it be with Tinkerbell, like I mentioned earlier. Jake and the Neverland Pirates had his own TV series, and also you had there were sequels of it, like the Tinkerbell sequels, as I mentioned earlier, and then Peter Pan and Wendy came out as well. So that has its own iconography in terms of, Peter Pan staying in a lot of the Disney fandom. You also have with Sleeping Beauty. I mean, yes, I would say that Sleeping Beauty does have its own iconography as well, with especially with Maleficent. 101 Dalmatians is just overloaded with a lot of stuff. You have the live action remake and its sequel. Then you had the animated series that came out in the 90s. You had a recent animated film that animated series that came out not too long ago. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people still have fond memories with that one. And Jungle Book around the 90s was when it started becoming more popular. You had Jungle Cubs, you had the live action Jungle Book movie where it features a more adult Mowgli. You had the live action remake. So again, it does have its stance in pop culture, and especially with that amazing soundtrack. So yeah, that would be my answer. All right, and finally, last but not least, our personal favorite.
Well, like I said, well, even though, and I guess I might be throwing you a bone with this one, that even though I maintain that The Sword in the Stone is highly underappreciated and one of my favorite Disney films of all time, from this particular era, my absolute favorite still has to be Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah,
As far
mine too.
as I go, just it does so perfectly encapsulate the insanity that I think Lewis Carroll himself was trying to articulate in the book itself, and the characters themselves are absolutely wonderful. It's actually one of those films where probably again, there's so many other characters that overshadow the main one. I mean, you've got the Queen of Hearts, you've got the Mad Hatter and the March Hare, the Cheshire Cat remains one of my favorite characters of all time. I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with Alice as a character, but it's one of those movies where almost the entire supporting cast carries that film. And and perhaps that's one of the reasons why it remains so iconic in my own mind.
Yeah, I do agree. 100% agree. I feel that it was able to deliver the whole package of just being really entertaining, has a great protagonist, has great animation. And I also feel that there's just a lot of peaks and rises to the film that just makes it a fantastic package. So out of all of them that came out during this era, I do agree it is my favorite. All right, so now we go over to the Bronze Era or the Dark Era. Now, I've actually gotten some comments online from people saying that no, the Bronze Era is the 70s and the Dark Era is the 80s. Well, it's difficult to say because I've seen many online articles saying that the Dark Era and the Bronze Era are essentially the same, and it contains the 70s and the 80s. So yeah, you can be pedantic all you want, but I'm just going to put it down that it could be either the Bronze Era or the Dark Era. We're going to talk about both of the films from the 70s and the 80s. So we're going to have the Aristocats, Robin Hood, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, The Rescuers, The Fox and the Hound, The Black Cauldron, The Great Mouse Detective, and Oliver and Company. So let's get started. Favorite protagonist?
Well, yeah, this is definitely something that's gonna be a more challenge to me because I didn't know going into, especially even once we started here, wasn't sure if this was going to be all together in one or separate individually. So, actually combining them two might actually make this a bit more challenging for me. That being said, probably my best, even taking all these together, favorite protagonist of all together, I probably still got to go with Robin Hood himself, the main protagonist of the Robin Hood film itself, who just probably is the ultimate swashbuckling hero of at least this particular era, and just absolute fun to be around.
Yeah. for me, it's kind of a tie between Robin Hood and Basil of Baker Street from Great Mouse Detective, because Robin Hood is the swashbuckler. He's very dashing. He's very charming. He's very quick on his feet. And then you have Basil, who's very intelligent. He's kind of snarky. And at the same time, like, he's always experimenting with everything, trying to put the clues together. So it's really hard to decide on whether one or the other. So I'm going to have to say it's a tie between both of them. All right. So favorite sidekick slash companion.
Okay, now to set this one up as to let you know exactly who my favorite sidekick has to be, it comes back to the fact that there's one particular movie from this era that I actually appeared in a stage adaptation of twice. And in fact, us as an entire cast and production staff knew that even though this stage play wasn't actually based on the Disney version of it, we all decided we needed to do the Disney version of this and portray ourselves as the Disney versions of the characters, because we knew that was the audience they said. And the part I had was one that, yes, perhaps in some cases, I probably find myself identifying with. My own sister has claimed I pretty much am this character. So in fact, I think when we were at Walt Disney World together, Patty was the one character I absolutely had to get a photo op with. And that, of course, is Eeyore.
Yes, I remember this. We were at an all-you-can-eat buffet, and there were various characters who were walking around, and one of them was Eeyore, and you were wanting to get a picture with him. And I still have that on my phone to this day. And I remember the excitement that you had when we were able to, to see a lot of these characters from Winnie the Pooh. And yeah, it's a great choice. As for like my favorite of the companion slash characters, I'm gonna have to go back again with like Robin Hood and say that Little John is probably my favorite, because he is just as like clever with his disguises and just as fun as, say, with like, I guess Baloo would probably be an example of it. I mean, it's essentially Baloo, but instead, it's a different type of bear, and instead of being in the jungles of India, he's in the forests of Nottingham in England. So, but I still love his personality as a companion towards Robin Hood. I think they just have this great chemistry together. So that's why I'm going to choose that.
If Winnie the Pooh was not included in this era, Little John would have absolutely been my choice.
Okay, then.
For whatever that's worth. It's the fact that, again, it's the fact how much, again, Eeyore is just one of those characters that I found myself identifying with for so much of my own childhood that there really was no other choice for me personally.
Right, of course. All right, favorite antagonist. This is a no-brainer for me.
I think I have an idea who your choice might be, and I'm going to say this. This might be a bit difficult for me, because I will say this. There are actually two of who I believe to be maybe the most underappreciated villains of all time. One, I hope, sorry to give a spoiler, but one, as I'm guessing, is your choice, which is Professor Ratigan from The Great Mouse Detective. The other would be the villain whose name escapes me, unfortunately, from The Rescuers on there.
I see. Okay, so your favorite villain from it would be Madame Medusa then.
Well, no. Let's see. That's Medusa. Yeah, Madame Medusa. I'll say Madame Medusa and Professor Ratigan are probably two of the most underappreciated villains of all time. Yeah. That being said, my favorite villain from this era still has to be Prince John.
Yeah, Prince John is, like I said, if Ratigan wasn't on this list, I would have definitely chosen Prince John for sure, because I just love the fact that he is just this, person of power, yet at the same time, he is just this absolute coward. Exactly. I just love
He's a man-child.
Yeah, he is a man-child. I just love the juxtaposition of that. And we were talking about this in the podcast, that phony King of England became really, really big during Donald Trump's presidency. So the fact that we were able to have just this huge king who thinks that, you have this prince who thought that he was going to be the king. He was going to overtake his brother while he was fighting off in the Crusades. And he just basically turned the entire village all the way down to poverty, where he basically just took all the riches for himself and everybody was just practically starving to death. It was up to Robin Hood and Little John and all of the companions, like whether it be with Maid Marian and Lady Cluck, who just basically just saved everybody. And Prince John was just left in the gallows, just hitting on stones because he was imprisoned. And so the fact that that comeuppance was just incredibly satisfying. And yeah, like I said, if Radigan was not on this list, I would have definitely chosen Prince John. But yeah, Madame Medusa from The Rescuers is also another really, really close one in terms of like a great villain. I mean, she's essentially like Cruella de Vil. Instead of wanting puppies, she wants the diamond. And I just recently saw Joanna Quinn, an animator from England who I interviewed several years ago for her short, where she was posting a lot of Milt Kahl's animation of Madame Medusa, where she was actually studying it and integrating it into her own short films. And I just thought that that was really interesting because of the movement that Madame Medusa was able to make with just her futzing around and her pulling off the eyelashes and her just walking around trying to, convince Penny to go after the diamond. So yeah, I would say like it's a Cruella de Vil-esque villain. Yeah, Madame Medusa is also another great contender, but yeah, Radigan is definitely my favorite out of this bunch. He is just so amazingly over the top, but yet when he snaps, it is terrifying and scary, and performed brilliantly by the late Vincent Price. So yeah, that's my choice for my favorites. Best setting. Now, this is a difficult one because a lot of these have very, very interesting settings, and they're all different too, very similar to what we were talking about during the Silver Era.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one where they probably really go with a lot of historical types of eras throughout this entire time period. You've got, I believe, it's early 20th century France with the Aristocats. Mm-hmm. You've got medieval England with Robin Hood. And then, of course, probably 19th century England with the Great Mouse Detective. Even probably for all of its flaws, the Black Cauldron's got a pretty damn good setting as well in trying to create the land of Prydain. That being said, I am just looking, even watching it, it really amazes me how well the Disney animators were able to animate and depict the setting of 1980s New York City in Oliver and Company. Just even continue watching this day, it is just so damn impressive how much they got so much in that city. The busyness, the grunge, the smoke oaky skies all the time. It's really might be the most underappreciated animated setting of the entire Disney library.
Absolutely. And especially from somebody who is, was a former New Yorker and who lived around that time period of like, during the, late 80s and then eventually around the late 90s to early 2000s. I got to experience all of that. Like you have the big busy setting of New York in the cities. You have all the different walks of life with different people, and every single corner there's always like a different facet of different cultures. Like if you walk a few blocks, you're in the Chinese section. If you walk a few more blocks, you're in the Jewish section. If you walk a few more blocks, you're in the Hispanic section. So yeah, they all have their different providences of different locations where each culture is able to speak out. And yeah, I mean, in New York, I mean, especially in animated form, I mean, you always see like the same old kind of like setting but in this case where you have the different facets of the dirty and the grungy and the prim and the proper when you head over to Jenny's house, and that really interesting scene where you have Sykes in the subway and then eventually just crashing into it. And yeah, I mean, it's just so busy, it's loud, it perfectly encapsulates New York City. I do agree with that. I mean, I would say that all the settings are great. I mean, I would say that with Black Cauldron, it has that classic fantasy setting as well. And Grey's Mouse Detective, as somebody who recently went to London and was able to see all the the classic landmarks where you have like Buckingham Palace and Big Ben, where you actually get to experience that surrounded by a whole bunch of other people, was also a great experience. I was sad that I did not go on a rainy day. I would have loved to get the full on gloomy, dark, rainy experience, but I had to go on a sunny day like a jerk. But no, I mean, it was still a lot of fun though, even though I walked like 6 miles in that day and I was so exhausted. But yeah, as the former New Yorker in me, I do love the setting in Oliver and Company. It really means a lot to me as somebody who grew up during that time period and who really got to feel the true essence of that. So yeah, I would say that that's probably my favorite setting. Now, best art style slash animation. Now, again, due to the fact that it was around the time when the Xerox movement was still at its peak, and due to Disney's death, you have the nine old men who were still working and always contemplating on what would Walt do. So you had that transitional piece, especially with Fox and the Hound, where essentially the nine old men pretty much had their last work right at that movie, where you saw that the first half was done by the nine old men, and then the new generation of animators were able to work on the second half. And you could definitely tell where the first half was definitely a lot more lighter, it was a lot more cheerful, it was a lot more colorful, whereas the second half was definitely where it was a lot more darker. And then we continue on with that constantly with the Black Cauldron, and then later on when we would get over to the later films, where it definitely just had that presence of just like the passing of the torch from one generation to another. So yeah,
and you know what, the amazing ironic thing is that with all of the trouble that they went through, with all of the turnover trying to get the film produced, I would probably pick The Fox and the Hound as having the best animation of this period. It actually might be the film that's come closest to the animation helping completely be so descriptive in the setting since Bambi, I might have to say. It's a very similar setting to Bambi, of course, and it's another one where I think the animation does a very huge job in establishing that setting.
Yeah, this is really difficult for me because I do agree that Fox and the Hound definitely has the light presence of the nine old men in there, and then afterwards we have the new generation basically like taking the torch. So I would say for that, maybe, but I mean, I cannot deny about how amazing The Great Mouse Detective is, especially with that scene in Big Ben where they were able to utilize CGI for the very first time. And it would continue on even to this day where we have, animators taking those kind of techniques and is able to build it up in a bigger scope. And yeah, I would say like they were able to play it off where they were able to create some new boundaries that they've never been able to do before. So I would have to give it to The Great Mouse Detective for that. All right, now we go over to best song slash soundtrack.
And this one's I'm really sorry that I had to more or less give this film the pass over, because if it was, again, if in just about any other era, let's say if my choice, again, this is the case, if my choice wasn't in this era, then I almost certainly would have gone with Robin Hood, which I think a lot of people probably would pick. That having been said, probably not my favorite all-time soundtrack of Disney films has to go to Oliver and Company. I mean, when you've got the vocal musical talents of Billy Joel, Bette Midler, Huey Lewis, even it's just one of those that's always been one of the favorites that I can tune into just about any time. And I think for a lot of people, the songs individually probably carry the film more than about any of Disney's films since Fantasia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that you don't even have to watch Oliver and Company in order for you to enjoy the music that is playing. You can be able to listen to it on its own merits. Yeah, it's difficult because you do make an argument. I would choose personally for me Robin Hood because I personally really enjoy the music that was able to showcase over there. You have Love at Last, you have Phony King of England, you have Oodalali, which eventually would go over to the Amsterdam song. I can't believe that even is an existing thing. I just don't know how and why. But yeah, I just love the fact that even still to this day that they were able to incorporate some of that stuff into later films. I mean, like, first of all, Love at Last is featured in Fantastic Mr. Fox. Phony King of England was able to become hugely popular, especially during Trump's presidency. And again, Oodalali becoming the Amsterdam song. So yeah, I mean, I would say, like, the performances on that song were really, really good. I just love the catchiness of it, and the varied from being like really, really mellow and really depressing, but at the same time really, really upbeat. Again, Oliver and if Oliver and Company probably would have been my choice if Robin Hood wasn't in it. So it was really difficult to say. All right, so the film that made the biggest impact.
Well, first off, I think we had was best story.
Oh, that's right, best story. Yeah, best story. So
yeah, and here's where I'm basically gonna flip the card over here. If Oliver and Company for me probably had the best songs and soundtrack, I will go with Robin Hood as probably having the best story, at least most entertaining. I'll say this: it might be a tough call between Robin Hood and the Great Mouse Detective, but for me, I think Robin Hood just ekes out in that area.
Yeah, I would say so too, because with Great Mouse Detective, it's a great story, don't get me wrong, and it's an interesting mystery as well. But at the same time, Robin Hood is just really, really entertaining. Like, you really get invested in Robin Hood's crazy dynamics. You get really invested in the story of Prince John and the love story that is even mixed into it. It has a little bit more variation, whereas with Great Mouse Detective, it does have a bit of mystery and it does have a little bit of suspense. But yeah, I would say personally for me, I think that Robin Hood definitely has the best story. I think that it was able to come together and be its own complete package. So I do agree on that. The film that made the biggest impact.
Okay, this is where things have to get kind of unfortunate, because looking at there's one film in here that I really think, well, this is the one time where I have to say this is a case of a film making the biggest impact, but not in a good way. And sadly, probably when you look at it historically, what probably had the most impact has to be The Black Cauldron, just for the fact that it unfortunately was probably where Disney's animation hit rock bottom, unfortunately. And it unfortunately, because its failure to deliver at the box office, forced a huge number of changes to finally have to take place above all else. Of course, it took place at the exact time when Michael Eisner and his new troupe were just taking over, and a lot of them were already believing that animation didn't have a future at Disney anymore for the first time since the late 40s and early 50s. And it really needed a lot of coaxing from Roy E. Disney himself to keep the studio going, even after The Black Cauldron was such an unfortunate massive failure for them. So yeah, sometimes, I mean, there's impact in a positive way and there's impact in a negative way. And unfortunately, even though it was negative, probably The Black Cauldron had the most impact, as unfortunate as I have to say that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree 100%. I mean, this movie lost to the Care Bears movie. Think about that. In the box office, it lost to the Care Bears movie. That was probably the lowest point in their entire history. Where, it was essentially, this was supposed to be the film that was the passing of the torch. After most of the 9 old men had retired after finishing with Fox and the Hound, this was the first film that the new generation were working on by themselves without any assistance from the 9 old men. And they had a lot to prove, and they failed. They failed big time. And there was like a wonder about like if animation should even continue going on at this point, because it was such a massive failure. It was a departure from everything that we knew about Disney. So yeah, for that reason alone, it had a big impact because of where Disney was at that time. So yeah, I mean, it's like you said, I mean, impacts can be for both good and for bad. And for this one, it's for absolutely horrendous, but it was very important for the next steps that Disney would take so that they can be able to get back on their feet. But it would take them a while for them to get there. All right, the film that we feel that is overlooked and underrated.
I know it would probably be trendy to pick something like either Robin Hood or The Great Mouse Detective. But you know what? Both of those films, they get so much praise especially on the internet nowadays, that I don't really know if I can go with them. So I'm going to have to go here and say that I probably of this era, Oliver and Company is probably the most underappreciated as far as I go. It does still have a really good story when you really look at it, and in fact the setting. And keep in mind, this is the one film that they managed to pluck Dom DeLuise away from Don Bluth's studio for at least just this one time, and he delivers. His character of Fagin might be the best thing in the entire movie, and it does have its merits as far as as far as I'm concerned, for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot imagine Fagin being in Land Before Time. That would be such a stark juxtaposition, especially since Dom DeLuise is known for being a comedian, even though that he did show off his seriousness in All Dogs Go to Heaven, where he was able to play beautifully as Itchy, especially in that scene in which when Itchy was beaten up by Carface, and then he tells Charlie about the ratifications of taking in Anne Marie and trying to go into a low profile, but then instead it just completely backfires, where he was able to tell him, let's just get out of town, but I stayed because I was your friend. And that was a really heart-wrenching moment. But I in a way, like I said, I'm so glad that he was in Oliver and Company as opposed to Land Before Time, because I cannot imagine what character he would have been in. But yeah, I mean, I'm probably playing off that cliche here, but yeah, I mean, as much as, Robin Hood and Great Mouse Detective are still getting somewhat recognition, I still feel that Great Mouse Detective isn't like as recognized compared to all the other Disney classics. I mean, at that time period where people still fondly remember Robin Hood and Winnie the Pooh and various other films, yeah, I mean, some people don't seem to really recognize the film outside of just Radigan and Basil of Baker Street, and of course the iconic scene in Big Ben. I mean, all the other stuff is just not as really discussed about as much, and so I'm gonna put Mouse Detective on that one. All right, personal favorite. This is a really tough one.
It was for me, especially because, believe me, I would love to go against the grain as much as possible and put Oliver and Company as my favorite in this one. And it is still one of my guilty pleasure, underappreciated favorites of Disney's entire library. But at the end, and then it's probably also would at the same time probably also be trendy to go with Great Mouse Detective, because like you said, you believe that's probably one of the most underappreciated. But when you look at all of these, you know what? Maybe I could go with Black Cauldron. I'm kidding there. But no, at the end of it all, I probably still got to go with Robin Hood.
Me
It
too.
is
I'm
just
go with
one
Robin
of the
Hood.
most. And it is kind of amazing that it's probably the one film of all of these that Disney itself never really thought it would be as beloved, even to this day, that it remains. There's just something that's outright fun about it. It's probably the best term I can use for it.
Yeah, this was a film that they thought was a failure and they wanted to sweep it under the rug. But then, as the decades went on, this film became a beloved classic. I literally told you about what happened to me about over a decade ago, where I was shopping in Walmart, and then I saw a little kid going over to approach his dad with a Robin Hood 40th anniversary DVD, saying he wanted the film. He must have been like, I don't know, like 8 or 9 or 10 years old. Most likely had never seen the film before, but he saw the cover and he said that he wanted it. And he was telling his dad, I want this movie. And it's like, this movie came out 40 years ago and it's still attracting kids to this day. It just goes to show you the power that this film has. And yeah, it's a great film. It's really, adventurous. It has a great swashbuckling protagonist. It has really entertaining characters. It has great music. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I think that it's still a classic for a lot of people for many reasons. And I do feel that out of the films from this era, it's definitely my favorite of them. I'm surprised that you didn't pick Winnie the Pooh for this one.
I mean, I guess for the fact that I never really view it as an individual film itself. Most of my childhood was spent watching just the individual vignettes separated and put into like some of Disney's TV specials and stuff. Maybe it's the fact that I never actually saw it in theaters, or even on the Disney Channel in its full format. Maybe that's kind of that probably it didn't. In that way, it didn't resonate as one of my favorites. I do still love the shorts, but maybe as a film that just didn't identify with it, I suppose.
Okay, that's fair enough. All right. Well, now we're going to go over to our thoughts on the Renaissance era. This is going to be really interesting because there is so much to choose in this category. So, the Disney Renaissance, as we mentioned in our very first discussion of the era films on our podcast. So, yeah, so basically after the release of Oliver and Company, Disney essentially went back to basics, where John Musker and Ron Clements from The Great Mouse Detective created an adaptation of The Little Mermaid written by Hans Christian Andersen. And from that chain was essentially a decade's worth of critically acclaimed, financially successful, and impactful animated movies. The Little Mermaid, The Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan, and Tarzan. Here we go. Favorite protagonist.
This, you know what? Even for all of these movies and their lead characters within this time, this is absolutely a no-brainer because this is the era that definitely contains my favorite protagonist of all time, and that is the street rat himself, Aladdin.
Oh, that's a good one. Is a really good one. I mean, it's really difficult to choose like all of these characters because every single one of them are great in their own reasons. But my favorite's Belle. It's always been Belle because I related to her so much when I was a kid. I was always loving books. I was always kind of like that person who was just alone. Not a lot of people really understood me, so I really related to her a lot. And even to this day, she's my favorite Disney princess. So yeah, I have to choose her for that reason. All right. Favorite sidekick / companion. This is this is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, this is one why I'm going to have to give you an unfortunate tie here, and it's an interesting one because this is one where I'm going to give you a favorite hero sidekick and a favorite villain sidekick.
I know where you're going with this.
And amazingly, of course, they are in the same film. I have to go with Genie and Iago from Aladdin. You cannot overstate just how amazing a job Robin Williams did with the character of Genie. While there were plenty of great characters, he was the one that carried that film among all else. That having been said, probably the most fun character for me was Gilbert Gottfried's portrayal of Iago. Another one of those incredibly sarcastic characters that just, for some reason, I've always loved identifying with. And the fact that probably I've always been able to do a relatively good Gilbert Gottfried impersonation myself. Those two characters have just always been among my absolute favorites.
Yeah. They're my favorites as well. Now, like I think that I would have to say the Genie is probably my favorite. I mean, there's no question. I would say that in terms of like the sarcastic, the fun, the goofy, the fourth wall breaking sidekicks, the Genie was the one that kind of like laid the foundation. All the other ones afterwards tried so hard to kind of like be similar to them. I mean, Robin Williams tried to do a second attempt of it with Batty from Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest. They tried to do the same thing again with all of the other sarcastic characters, but they just couldn't really pull it off. But yeah, I mean, this would be like the basis for a lot of these characters that would be following over towards when a lot of these animation companies were trying to rip off Disney movies and didn't understand on what made them so great. So yeah, I definitely would say that Genie is definitely the best companion during this time period. I mean, there is no question, no denying it. Okay, so favorite antagonist. This is really hard.
Absolutely. This is probably the best collection of villain antagonists since the Silver Age. And believe me, this is what I'm going to have to give you kind of a twofer here. One, despite all of these great villains, my favorite of this particular period still has to be Jafar from Aladdin. That
Mhm.
being said, this may be the period where you might have the most underrated villain of all time. At the very least, the character who has maybe the most underappreciated villain song of all time, and that would be one Percival McLeach
Oh
from the
wow.
Rescuers Down Under, because there might not be a more underappreciated, entertaining song I've ever heard than "Home, Home on the Range, where critters are tied up in chains. I cut through their sides and I rip out their hides, and the next day I do it
Yeah.
again."
George C. Scott does an amazing job as playing as McLeach. I mean, the fact that he's just so hammy, yet at the same time so menacing, being this poacher who will do everything so that he can be able to get Makuhita. So yeah, that's really difficult. I mean, all of the villains from here are just absolutely phenomenal. Now, as for like who I feel would be like a very menacing villain, it's really difficult because they're all really great, whether it be with, with Ursula, who is able to just, be that sinister yet fun personality. Same thing with Scar from The Lion King. Oh man, this is hard. This is really hard. I mean, Frodo from Hunchback of Notre Dame is a really fantastic villain. I mean, he's basically supposed to be like this man of God, but he's a hypocrite because at the same time, he's just manipulating this poor hunchback and saying that everything is evil. And then he's trying to lust over Esmeralda the gypsy, even though that he thinks that, that he's basically like being lured into the devil for doing that. Oh man, it's really hard. I mean, it's difficult to say which one is like undeniably amazing. I mean, Scar from The Lion King actually achieves what he wanted to do. He killed Mufasa and he became the king of Pride Rock. So in that sense, he would probably be like a villain who actually accomplished his goal. So yeah, as for which one is like that I feel is I think yeah, I mean, but then again, Jafar was able to accomplish it, but he was thwarted by Aladdin and the genie. But at least Scar was able to accomplish it. Again, I'm going to choose Scar from The Lion King. He had that amazing song, "Be Prepared." He had that huge army of the hyenas. He was able to accomplish his goal. He was thwarted in an amazingly satisfying way with just his own words of killing Mufasa and then saying that the hyenas were the ones who caused all of it. And he actually has a complete arc. And then following over with The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, where you get to see the remnants of Scar's pride, and then you get the Lion Guard, where you actually do get to see remnants of the evilness of Scar going over to Kion. So his presence is still following. So yeah, in that sense, I'm going to choose Scar from The Lion King. All right, so next one. Best setting. Again, this is difficult.
Yeah, it can be very difficult because there are a lot of great settings in this thing. From the undersea world of the Little Mermaid that starts out with, you get so many different locations, like the African jungles of the Lion King, even from a fictitious Middle Eastern setting of Aladdin. We won't speak about Pocahontas in that regard, but when I look at this, when I look at a movie that probably where the setting that where especially just the scope of the setting is just so beautifully shown off, I may have to go with Mulan here.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Mulan has an amazing scope of its setting. Like it starts off with the Great Wall of China. And then eventually you go over to the small villages. You see the vast scopes of China. You have that iconic scene where Xiao Yun and his soldiers are going down into the mountain, and you get to see the epic scope of it. They were able to play off China very, very well with just the absolute scale of how huge it is. So yeah, I would say Mulan does have an amazing setting. I mean, not to say that the others don't. I mean, don't get me wrong. Little Mermaid has the great, setting with the ocean, and then eventually over into the land. And then you have the Rescuers Down Under, where you get to see all of Australia, and yeah, all I mean, then of course the Lion King, where you have the massive scope of Africa. I mean, it's really tough because Mulan is definitely with its scope as well. Lion King is also with its scope as well. I mean, I would say that they're kind of like intertwined with each other, but yeah, Mulan is really, really big with its scope and its setting. All right, art style / animation.
Yeah, of course, obviously, there's a lot of great animation from this era, but there is one specific reason why I am actually going with Beauty and the Beast with this one. I don't know if you ever saw this, but I actually, back in the 80s as a kid, watched a special on the fifth, commemorating the 50th anniversary of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And in this thing, they told about how quite a bit of the animation was used. It was actually filmed full size glass plates that were painted, the animation were painted on and filmed with that. When I first saw Beauty and the Beast in theaters, the opening scene of the Prince's Castle in the forest, looking at that thing, maybe I'm wrong about this, but just made me think that they actually might have gone back to that style. That they have just for that one scene, they may have used the plate glass, the painted plate glass animation, at least just for that one, as if it was some homage to the original for what was the 30th film. If they didn't, they did a pretty damn good job replicating that. And just the fact that they did that along with the computerized style, which of course everyone back when it was filmed looked at and touched on. Of course, the famous chandelier scene with the dancing of Belle and the Beast in the Great Hall while Miss Potts is singing the theme song a lot. It was just a great combination scene of everything that made me think that that's probably where the animation may have been at its absolute peak of this era.
I agree. I know a lot of people would have argued The Lion King would have been in terms of its style, but yeah, I agree that Beauty and the Beast was definitely so. It feels like it calls back into like 40s, 50s animation, but done in a bigger scale. Even though that technically, films like Great Mouse Detective was able to incorporate the CGI into the Big Ben, and then of course The Rescuers Down Under was able to utilize the cap system, but I would say that it perfected it in Beauty and the Beast, where they were able to see the castle scene in the very first shot. And then you got to see the huge scope of the castle. And then you got to see the provincial town. You got to see all of these things play off beautifully in the style and the animation of the film. And I think that it was able to take advantage of just the huge scope that they were able to play around with. And also the fact that they were able to play around with the different seasons where, it starts off, whether it be like spring or summer, then it goes over to winter time, and then you have the rain falling toward the climax. And yeah, I think that they were able to utilize so much things in it that I feel that it's just amazing. And the fact that literally, like, if you were to see the behind the scenes of Beauty and the Beast, where they were able to show off the rough animatic of the film even before the film was even finished, it got a standing ovation. And it wasn't even finished yet. And it was able to just like lured in so many people saying like, wow, this is Disney back in their peak. This is going to be like the cinematic masterpiece. So yeah, I do agree that it does have the best animation style of this era. Now, again, this is going to be really difficult. The best song / soundtrack.
Yeah,
Wow.
it would seem like this because, again, this was the time period where Disney was just absolutely cleaning up the best song category at the Academy Awards back at this time.
Yes.
But for me, yeah, it actually isn't that difficult. It's Aladdin all the way.
Okay.
I mean, would you just the songs, especially with Robin Williams getting to sing his own musical talents with Friend Like Me and Prince Ali. In fact, I'm going to tell you this. If there's one thing that definitely pissed me off as a kid, which clearly was a result of the falling out Robin Williams had with Disney during the production of this thing, it was the fact that he wasn't there to perform Friend Like Me at the Academy Awards. They got the two singers who performed A Whole New World or to perform at the Oscars, but Robin Williams wasn't there, and I was really upset as a kid did not get that for a live performance there. But yeah, Aladdin is one of my absolute favorite soundtracks ever for a Disney film.
Yeah. And I'm sure that Disney would never, ever do this again, where they would just offset the people who sang the original songs and get celebrities in it. But no, I mean, yeah, Aladdin is definitely like a fantastic soundtrack. And again, this is really difficult to choose from because all of the soundtracks from this era are phenomenal. If you want to talk about like, definitive classic Disney songs, you could pick out from any of them from this time period. I mean, but I would have to say consensus wise about like the one that kind of like started it all, it's The Little Mermaid. It was the one that was able to bring back songs and be able to become essential into Disney animated films that, it would lead over to like a whole bunch of musicals that we would see throughout the course of the 90s. And again, that Disney knockoffs would try to emulate but didn't do very well. I mean, you have the amazing talents of Howard Ashman and Alan Menken working magic together to creating such amazing music together. I mean, you have Under the Sea, you have Part of Your World, you have Kiss the Girl. I mean, they were able to incorporate these songs in a way that was able to tell the story, be completely catchy and memorable, yet at the same time is able to stick into your brain. I mean, even like long after you've not seen the movie for decades, if you listen to that song even just for 1 second, you already know what the lyrics are because of just how amazing it is. I remember watching the documentary Howard with my sister, Carlene. You guys may have heard her in the podcast several times over the year, where we talked about the BBC top 50 greatest songs from their list. Don't worry, we'll get to part two eventually, even though it's been a whole year since we released part one, but we'll get there. But we did talk about the Little Mermaid soundtrack. And when we talked about watching Howard together, and then we saw the impact that he was able to do with those songs with Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. She was telling me that even though that he had been long gone, the songs will stay forever. And that really impacted me. It's like we saw this life where Howard was struggling to get his name out there. And then finally, when he was at the peak of his popularity, he got sick and he died from HIV/AIDS. And the fact that his life was cut so short of what could have been if he would have stuck around to write more songs for Aladdin, or what would have happened if he would have wrote songs for The Lion King and for Pocahontas and for all the other songs. I mean, makes you wonder about what would have happened if he would have stuck around a little longer to write more of the songs from Disney, or maybe he would have spun off and wrote songs for DreamWorks or for Pixar or for any other studio, or maybe he could have tried doing more musicals again, like Little Shop of Horrors. I mean, who knows? But the fact that it started right there with The Little Mermaid, of incorporating more music into our pop culture. And that's not to say that the songs from the previous eras didn't. I mean, you were saying before about like Oliver and Company, about how amazing they were able to get all of their singers to perform all their songs as well. But not much of a huge impact did it leave behind until like The Little Mermaid came along. So yeah, that's probably going to be my choice in terms of that. Although if I had to choose like one that had like a really epic scope in terms of its soundtrack, I mean, The Lion King is really, really right up there, where it was able to not only have the amazing songs written by Elton John and Tim Rice, but Hans Zimmer was able to just create this really epic scope with the soundtrack. It's amazing if you just listen to it on its own. Okay, the best story.
Yeah, I would love to try and, again, go against the grain with this one. But when you look at all of them, probably The Lion King stands out among all the others, especially when the thing, this is one time where, even though I probably don't dislike the film as much as he did, this is one time where I have to go alongside confused Matthew himself when claiming that calling this story a ripoff of Hamlet is just completely a cop out there. This story is so much more than what Hamlet is. This is a coming of age story by the young Simba, who he's not forced into having to off his own offspring like Hamlet was in the Shakespeare's play. He's able to make his own decisions, and having to deal with the fact that he thinks he has to confront the sins of his past, only to discover that they weren't his sins at all. It's a much deeper story than just saying, oh, they copied a Shakespeare play and made lions on it. That just underappreciates what a story that it is.
I do agree, yeah. And even though that as we mentioned in the podcast a few years ago, that this was the B project. If you remember that Pocahontas was supposed to be like their main big film that they were going to release right after Aladdin. And The Lion King was just like a side thing that they were going to be doing. But then it turned out to be the other way around, where Lion King was so massive, where it was able to become really, really popular in terms of its epic story, where you have this young cub who goes through a lot of trials and tribulations and thinking that he was the one who caused all of this trouble that happened towards his home, when in reality, he was tricked by his uncle because his uncle wanted power and he was jealous towards his brother and his nephew. And I think that that's a really interesting story, especially for one that was like played off in a Disney film of all things. And yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people compared it to both Hamlet, Bambi, and Kimba the White Lion, but it stands out on its own merits. So yeah, I would say in terms of like a complete story where we get to see that, we hadn't seen anything like this since Bambi, where we get to see like the progression of a young cub growing up into being a lion, taking his place and fulfilling his destiny. So yeah, I think it does have the best story. All right, the biggest impact.
Yeah, I mean, this probably is another one of those no-brainers here. I mean, there's been very few movies that probably had, especially for Disney, that had as much of an impact as Beauty and the Beast did. It might not have been, even though it wasn't the first, it's the movie that really launched the Renaissance full throttle in there. It became the first animated feature film to get nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. And it pretty much, for that, I mean, nothing against The Little Mermaid or The Rescuers Down Under, that thing, but Beauty and the Beast seems to be the one that set the standard for the Disney animated films for probably at least the next 10 years.
I agree. I agree 100%. Not only was it nominated for an Oscar, but it was the very first Disney film to get a Broadway musical. And we would get various other Broadway musicals of Disney films, whether it be with The Little Mermaid, whether it be with Tarzan, The Lion King, Frozen. So yeah, it set that standard. And it was also able to set a standard for an animated film to be nominated for Best Picture. And it just goes to show you that, I'm going to, quote Guillermo del Toro over here, that animation is a medium, it's not a genre. So it just goes to show you that, animation can be able to apply for not only George's films for kids, but also films that even adults can be able to gravitate towards. So yeah, I would say that in terms of the biggest impact, I do agree. Even though The Little Mermaid started it, Beauty and the Beast was able to expand it. All right, so overlooked and underrated.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of other people would probably go with something like Mulan or Tarzan here, but for me, probably one of the most underappreciated Disney films probably is The Rescuers Down Under. It kind of got, unfortunately, sandwiched in between the two colossal hits that were The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, and probably doesn't get as appreciated because it's one of the only films, if not the only film from this era, that wasn't a musical. But still, the story itself, the voice casting they got in there, the fact that they were able to bring back Bob Newhart and Ava Gabor, even though the actor that had played the original Albatross, I guess he had passed away or stuff, but we're able to get in John Candy to voice the new Albatross Wilbur in there. Just adds a whole other different aspect to the movie. And it probably is, it would probably be probably one of the best animated films ever made by any other studio that was not Disney. That's pretty much all I probably need to know.
Okay. Yeah, as for me, overlooked would probably still to this day, I would have said Hunchback of Notre Dame, because for the longest time it was that dark Disney movie. It was that movie that, wow, it really pushed the boundaries in terms of like the story it was trying to tell. It was trying to be a cautionary tale slash it was kind of like trying to be like a message on, how far can religion push itself a little bit too far. And the coming of age tale about a hunchback who's just trying to be free from the tower that he lived in all his life. And yeah, it had like this really menacing villain, and it had a really amazing soundtrack from Alan Menken. And Yeah, I think that the thing that weighted down for a lot of people was definitely the gargoyles. But in recent years, there has actually been a Broadway musical adaptation of Hunchback of Notre Dame that was able to incorporate a lot of things that people loved about the Disney film, and they removed the gargoyles completely. So yeah, I think that in recent years it started to become a lot more popular. So I'm not going to include Hunchback of Notre Dame for that reason. But yeah, I mean, Aaron and I talked about the Rescuers Down Under in an episode of In Search of the Crystal Skull where we were talking about, underrated gems. And yeah, I would say that Rescuers Down Under is definitely one of them. It does have its problems, though. I would say story wise, it's very similar to the first movie. And also, there's a lot of back and forth between Wilbur and then going back over to Cody and then going over to Bernard and Miss Bianca. So it does go a little bit all over the place, but the stuff that they were able to pull off is incredible. I would say that the animation is fantastic. They were able to have a great villain with McLeach. And also the fact that this movie even exists in the first place is just phenomenal, considering that they were working on this movie since the 80s when Crocodile Dundee was really popular. And even though that it underperformed, it became a bit of a cult classic, and a lot more people are recognizing it. So yeah, I do agree. I would put Rescuers Down Under in there as well. And it's kind of funny because I'm sure for us and our generation, we grew up with Rescuers Down Under first, and we didn't even know about the original Rescuers until a little later on. I
Well,
think we
I
even
knew about. Well, I had seen the original Rescuers first, so
Oh,
I
okay, you
was
did. All
I
right.
was well aware of it. Yes, definitely.
All right then.
It had played on the Disney Channel a number of times, so yeah, I had been able to see it.
Okay, that's fine. But yeah, I would say that Rescuers Down Under is still one that is underappreciated. All right, finally, personal favorite film. And again, this is really difficult.
Well, yeah. Okay, look, if you polled most probably people if what their favorite Disney film is, it's probably either going to be Frozen or something from this era. That being said, again, this is no brainer for me. Aladdin is my all-time favorite Disney animated film. Period. It is just probably one of the most upbeat, action-packed, comedic uh, films probably ever made with just the voice talents they have in there. Like I've said, Robin Williams just absolutely has one of the greatest performances of any Disney film ever. It's got just one of the most iconic villains of just being able to manipulate other people in that regard. And again, the main character is still one of my favorites ever. Jasmine is my absolute favorite Disney princess of all time. This is just no question for me. Absolutely.
All right then, that's fine. Yeah, Aladdin is a great film. I do agree. But Beauty and the Beast is my personal favorite because of everything that it was able to incorporate with the story, with the characters, with the music, just the fact that it was able to become such a great piece of a combining of the classic with the 40s and 50s style of animation, but at the same time incorporating it into something brand new. It was able to tell this really unique lesson about like not judging people by the way that they look, and how something that may appear to be really nice could be something really awful and sinister. Like for example, like Gaston could have been like a very strong rambunctious hero, like kind of like almost like a Braun Bone situation, but no, he's actually the villain of this one. And the Beast looks like something that could have been the bad guy, but no, he's actually the hero in this. And yeah, I think that in terms of everything that they were able to deliver into it, I think that that's probably my personal favorite. All right, so we're going to go over to the post-Renaissance era or the Second Dark era or the experimental era, whichever that you want to call it. Due to the fact that we have not covered the revival era and Wish will be coming out next month, we will have this as our last era that we'll be discussing about. And then for the revival era, we will be discussing about our favorites of that particular time period once we start talking about the films from that era. So this will be our final one. So the post-Renaissance era. This is around the time in which Disney was very experimental because competition started coming into full fruition. Pixar, DreamWorks, Sony Pictures Animation, and various other ones started to come into the limelight. Blue Sky Studio started coming in. So a lot of incorporation with CGI, a lot of different storytelling, just a different style of presentation with the jokes and the breaking of the fourth wall or the serious storytelling of gearing towards kids and adults with Pixar. this is when things were really shaking up for Disney. They hadn't seen anything like this since around the time when Walt had passed away around the late 60s. So, yeah, we have Fantasia 2000, Dinosaur, The Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis the Lost Empire, Lilo and Stitch, Treasure Planet, Brother Bear, Home on the Range, Chicken Little, Meet the Robinsons, and Bolt. So, favorite protagonist?
Yeah, I at first I thought looking over here, and keep in mind, this is probably the first era where there's a lot of films here I didn't see until just the last maybe couple of years, to be perfectly honest. So there's still probably a few that haven't had that much of an impact on me. I probably have to watch more of them to do that. That being said, I think there's probably, if you really, there's one protagonist that really stands out above the rest in all of these films, and it's got to be Kuzco. Yes. From The Emperor's New Groove. Just David Spade's portrayal of him. He is just, it is one of, it's a rare case where he would probably be the antagonist in any other Disney film, especially with how much he completely hams it up. But they flipped the script on that, and now he's the protagonist. And it's about him having defined himself within this whole situation.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, the fact that he was able to transform from being the spoiled prince over to somebody who was a lot more humble and sincere, it's just a great, tale where it was able to not only just be this, great piece on the change of somebody who was like really selfish to somebody who was more caring and considering. I think it's a great story arc. And I think for a character like that, who's not only like really awful, but at the same time, he's really, really funny. And David Spade's portrayal is absolutely phenomenal. And I would say that as a character piece, this is great. Now, if Kuzco was not on this list for Emperor's New Groove, I would have chosen Lilo from Lilo and Stitch, because she encompasses perfectly on a great child, where she's really rambunctious, she's a smart talker, and yet at the same time, she's very fearful and she's really concerned with a lot of things. She's a young child who recently lost her parents. She has to be raised by her older sister. So yeah, I would say like there's a lot of peaks and bounds for this character, but yeah, Kuzco definitely delivers it right out of the park. So I definitely do agree with that. All right, so sidekick / companion.
Yeah, this was a very, very difficult thing because there was a few that go in there. That being said, when I think look at probably was the most memorable sidekick for me, I'd probably go with Ben from Treasure Planet.
Okay.
His performance, again, it's one that's just absolutely over the top in that regard here. Just probably one of the most entertaining characters from this particular era.
That's a great choice. My choice is Stitch. Like, no question, it is Stitch. I just love the fact that he is just so absolutely insane. He's this crazy experiment who was meant to be destructive, but yet at the same time, he's just so lovable. He's so funny. He's so endearing. And the fact that his face is everywhere. Like, I literally told you back in the last podcast when we were talking about the post-revival era that outside of all the other Disney films that came out during this particular era, no other film has had this much merchandise and recognition than Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. Like, there is t-shirts, there is dolls, there is a mug. We literally purchased a like socks, a mug, and a Stitch doll for our niece last Christmas because she just loves the character so much. It's like her favorite. So the fact that Stitch is still a huge icon in Disney films, and probably sadly the only one from this particular time period, because a lot of the films underperformed in the box office. So the fact that Stitch still has that much staying power is just unbelievable. So yeah, Stitch is my favorite. Now, favorite antagonist.
Well, this is where I'm going to have to go along with my fellow colleague, one Mr. Enter, when he said that this particular individual is one of the most underappreciated and entertaining villains of all time of any Disney film, and that is Goob from Meet the Robinsons. Of course, the adult version of Goob from the future. He is just so wonderfully over the top, and like one of those quote unquote ineffectual villains that you would see from 1980s cartoons. He's just an absolute hoot to watch.
He is. I do agree that Bowler Hat Guy slash Goob is amazing and very underappreciated too, I do admit. But Yzma and Kronk are just amazing. Their dynamics are just so fun to watch. And them trying to be like awful villains trying to kill off Cusco is just a riot to see. I think that Eartha Kitt and Patrick Warburton just knock it out of the park with these characters. And so much so that Kronk was able to have his own spin-off movie called Kronk's New Groove. There was an entire animated series called The Emperor's New School where it featured them. So yeah, I mean, I do agree that Bowler Hat Guy slash Goob was a good one. Long John Silver from Treasure Planet is also a really good one too, being like the antagonist who cares about the treasure, but at the same time being a great father figure to Jim. But yeah, I would say Yzma and Kronk is my favorite. Okay, the best setting.
Okay, now this was one where I almost was going to go with Meet the Robinsons because of the whole time travel perspective that it goes in. But that having been said, to me, I don't think it's the setting that just absolutely blows me away is from Treasure Planet. That they take the story of Treasure Island and put it into an outer space steampunk setting. It just the way they're able to pull that off is just absolutely masterful as far as I see it.
It is very unique, I might admit, that you would think that something like Treasure Island would be like, okay, they're sailing in the ocean, they're going to go into different islands. But no, they decided to take it into space. Where, I mean, you have that iconic scene in which you think it's like a crescent moon, but in reality, it's this huge city. And the fact that they were able to have this huge treasure planet where it's literally like a planet that is made out of gold, that is really, really unique. And the fact that you have like these, you have these ships that are essentially like spaceships that are like flying in the air, akin to like Final Fantasy. So yeah, I do agree that this whole steampunk, cyberpunk thing is still really unique, even by Disney standards. Like they don't really do that kind of stuff anymore because unfortunately, Disney films, especially sci-fi Disney films or fantasy Disney films, don't do that well in the box office. Emperor's New Groove was kind of like a little bit of like a fantasy tale with like, Cusco turning into the llama, but that underperformed, but not as badly as El Dorado did, but it still got a bit of a cult following. Atlantis and Treasure Planet were the ones that underperformed the most out of this particular era, where Atlantis underperformed, but Treasure Planet was a bomb. But at the same time, I've seen so many articles online talking about how amazing those films are and how underrated they are. So, yeah, I would say for its setting, yeah, Treasure Planet is just absolutely unique and something that is never been, duplicated ever since. All right, so best art style slash animation.
I've got to go back to Treasure Planet here. Just the animation they used to create that entire outer space setting is I think one of the most underappreciated animation styles, particularly from the 2D Disney films. I don't know if it gets the credit that it deserves. Maybe unfortunately due to the fact that probably it did cost so much to make because of that, which was probably the number one reason why it did so terribly underperform at the box office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Treasure Planet is a really, really good one. It's kind of hard to say which one has the best art style because they all do in their own unique ways, whether it be with Lilo and Stitch with the watercolors, or maybe whether it be with Treasure Planet, as you were saying earlier. But Atlantis the Lost Empire, I would say, has the best one because it was able to play off so beautifully with the way that Atlantis looked, the way that 1910s America looked, when we got to see it like in the first act, and when we got to see the underwater setting, when we got to see Kita being transported up into the air for the first time, and we got to see the underwater settings. So yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing when you see it for the very first time. So yeah, I would say in terms of just that wow factor, Atlantis is probably my favorite out of that particular time period. Best song slash soundtrack. This is a little bit difficult considering that, there weren't a lot of songs in this particular time period. I mean, it was like little sprinkles here and there. Chicken Little just completely removed the entire soundtrack thing altogether and just played like pre-existing songs because they were trying to be DreamWorks. But yeah.
Yeah, and the sad thing is that was probably the most musical of all the films in this particular era. But just the fact that, yeah, they just use pop songs to fill it out just automatically disqualifies it for me in
Yeah,
that regard.
yeah, it doesn't
And
count.
that's why I'm probably going to go with The Emperor's New Groove here, to be
Mm.
perfectly honest.
Yeah, and it's kind of difficult because I mean, Lilo and Stitch also has a lot of great songs in it too, like Hawaiian Roller Coaster, but then it also has a lot of songs from Elvis as well that were incorporated into it. I mean, Home on the Range is probably the one that has like the most original songs, and so does Brother Bear. But Brother Bear, I feel like it tried to capture what Phil Collins was trying to do with Tarzan, but not as successfully. And Home on the Range, even though that Alan Menken came back to do the songs for it, and this will be the last time that he would come back to it until he worked on Tangled. But yeah, Home on the Range doesn't exactly have like a memorable soundtrack unless you want to count the yodeling song. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of difficult to say. But yeah, Emperor's New Groove, it doesn't really have a lot of music in it, though. I mean, Fantasia 2000 would probably be my choice because, very similar to the original Fantasia, they were able to incorporate a lot of great songs into the lineup. I mean, I mentioned before about Symphony Number 5 by Beethoven, Pines of Rome, Rhapsody in Blue, Piano Concerto Number 2, Carnival of the Animals, Pomp and Circumstance, Fireball Suite. So, yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of like, the soundtrack, and unfortunately, there's just not a lot of it in a lot of these films. I mean, Fantasia 2000 would probably be my pick. Although, I would say that Little Wonders from Meet the Robinsons is a great song on its own merits. If you listen to it by itself, it's amazing. It's a very, very hopeful and optimistic song about how every little moment should be appreciated for what it is. And then Hawaiian Roller Coaster from Lilo and Stitch is also a really good one too. All right, so yeah, best story.
This one again is now, while the Treasure Planet is a very good story in of itself, I just can't help but have a fondness for the story of Meet the Robinsons and just the journey that the main character has to go through of trying to, again, this is one of those where this character has to find a way to believe in himself when he starts into this. He begins the movie having no self-confidence whatsoever, even though he has ambition. He just doesn't seem to have the extra factor to push forward in that regard. And the time travel setting is another one of my favorites here. It's been long been suggested that this was supposed to be Disney's version of Back to the Future, which of course I've always pointed out is probably my favorite movie of all time. So that may have some impact on it as well. But this is probably this again is one of those stories where you have a protagonist you just find yourself wanting to root for, maybe more than anyone else.
Yeah. I would say in that aspect, I do agree on that as well. I would have also chosen Lilo and Stitch as well. But again, Stitch's story is also implemented into that story as well. And while I do enjoy Stitch's crazy antics, I really enjoyed Lilo and Nani's story. I wish that there would have been more focus on that. But, the movie is called Lilo and Stitch for a reason. So, yeah, I would say that in terms of, just a complete story focusing on a character's journey, yeah, Meet the Robinsons probably would be that. But if I had to choose, like, if I had to like say, oh, here's a story about a protagonist and their sidekick, yeah, Lilo and Stitch will probably be it. But yeah, as like a complete story with like a beginning, middle, and end, where we get to see the journey of the character, yeah, I would definitely say Meet the Robinsons. All right, so the film that made the biggest impact. I mean, there's no question, in my opinion.
Well, again, this is again another unfortunate situation where, like back in the Bronze/Dark Age, it's probably a situation of having the most impact and not in a good way. Unfortunately, the thing is, the interesting thing for me is it's actually got difficult to choose between one of these two films. It's almost like a domino effect to what happened here, because first you have Treasure Planet. And the fact that, again, it was one of Disney's most expensive films ever and just could not turn a profit. And that clearly affected how much they chose to budget animated films for at least the next two films. First was Brother Bear, And then the second possibility that I think may have had the most impact was Home on the Range, because that film failed so spectacularly that for all intents, chose Disney to give up on at least 2D animation. They did make at least 2 other 2D films after that, in The Princess and the Frog and the second Winnie the Pooh movie, but that it seems like that was when they determined that 3D animation had to be the way to go, especially because the 3D films that Pixar was churning out were by this time definitely outperforming what Walt Disney Animation Studios was doing. So, but of course, their first experiment in 3D animation from Walt Disney Animation Studios did not work out so well, and I got a feeling that's your pick for this.
Yeah, it is. The fact that very similar to when we were talking about the Black Cauldron of what left the biggest impact. Yeah, Chicken Little is the one that was another low point for Disney. This was essentially them saying, we want to try to be like DreamWorks. We want to try to be the hip, fun, and fourth wall breaking animated film with like a lot of characters and a lot of jokes and a pre-existing soundtrack made out of popular songs. Let's just do that, because clearly that's what the audience wants. And it failed so badly. I am just so surprised that Mark Dindal went from Emperor's New Groove, which was a hilarious movie, to Chicken Little. I'm interested about what he's going to do with Garfield, but that's another story. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I would say that in terms of big impact in a negative way, yeah, Chicken Little is my choice. But for positive, again, I'm going to Lilo and Stitch, because like I said before, out of all the films that came out in this era, it was the one that was easily the most iconic and the most recognizable. It was like the most critically acclaimed out of all the films that came out during this time period. So for good, Chicken Little. What am I talking about? For good, Lilo and Stitch. For bad, Chicken Little. I think we've been going on for too long at this point, so let's just finish up. So,
your thing.
All right. Overlooked, underrated. I think we kind of already answered this question. So I think it's probably a tie between Emperor's New Groove and Meet the Robinsons.
Believe me, it was a toss up between me on there. I think I'm going to give it to Emperor's New Groove, just for the fact of the knowledge of they were pretty much completely making that movie completely on the fly. They supposedly never had a full script at any one particular time. So the fact that they were able to get that movie completed at all, it just seems to be a major accomplishment for me. And so that's why I probably will give it the nod for this spot.
Agreed. I would say both Emperor's New Groove and Meet the Robinsons, their productions were hell, especially Emperor's New Groove. I would highly recommend that you watch a YouTube video called The Sweatbox, where you get to see the disaster that it took from them going over to Kingdom of the Sun, which is supposed to be a much more serious, take on like this Incan story where, it was going to be like a little bit more towards, a little bit more fantastical and, but more into less of a comedy, to the funny comedic movie that we have today. So yeah, it's a miracle that it turned out the way it did. And of course, Meet the Robinsons, where that was also a bit of a disaster in production. And like you were saying earlier, it was supposed to be like Disney's take on Back to the Future. And then of course we had John Lasseter, who came in and was able to kind of like straighten things back to where Meet the Robinsons was, even though that the story was loosely based off of a story that was written by William Joyce. They decided to go into a completely different direction with it. But then they were able to kind of like integrate a little bit of the book by William Joyce, where it was like toward the scene in which when Wilbur was introducing Lewis to his family. That's essentially the story right there. And then they were just able to work around the other stuff, because the director, from what I understand, was very similar to Lewis, in which he was an orphan and he was going through his ups and downs and struggles, and he wanted to tell the story about moving forward and trying to get hope into a hopeless situation. So again, both of them, they could have been disasters, but they turned out to be miraculous at the end. So finally, last but certainly not least, favorite personal film.
I gotta go with Meet the Robinsons here. Just, I mean, I of course I love the fact that they're the one time Disney tried to make a sci-fi time travel story and still managed to create a very touching character development plot line with Wilbur Robinson and everything he has to go through to try to find a way to believe in himself. And the fact that I said it's just it's almost kind of eerie how much the storyline of what Wilbur has to go through, of having to keep working through his failures in order to finally become the success he will eventually become in the future. How it links up with the struggles Disney was going through at the time, that they didn't know what their future was going to be at that particular time. And they were basically just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks before they finally start maybe to get their footing back on with the likes of Tangled and whatnot. And it just seems to be, it's almost like they knew that, and why the fact that the movie ends with that famous quote from Walt Disney himself, where he says, "We keep moving forward. We keep trying new things because we're curious, and curious takes us to whole different places." Paraphrasing that as best I can.
Sure.
Go. Just, it's like that was the absolute best message that movie could have possibly sent. It's why, to me, I think it's definitely one of the most underrated films, maybe the most underrated film that Walt Disney Studios has produced.
Right. And for me, it's a tie. I know it's a cop-out. I'm sorry, but it's definitely a tie. I would say that in terms of the humor, I mean, I have to give it to Emperor's New Groove, like no question whatsoever. It is a fantastic movie that is filled to the brim with just funny jokes and great characters. And I would definitely say with Meet the Robinsons is also a great contender as well. But I also really love Lilo and Stitch as well. I mean, I just love the story with Lilo and Nani. I really do enjoy the crazy dynamics of Stitch. Yeah, I would just say that it's just a great story as well, where you get to see the struggles and trials that they have to go through with losing their family, but at the same time still trying to continue on, and Stitch trying to learn from being destructive to being good. And he was able to learn from that because of a broken family. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult because, like you were saying earlier, Meet the Robinsons is also a really fantastic movie that deserves to have a lot more recognition. All right, so that should be it for now. Like we said before, we will discuss about our favorites from the revival era, but we will talk all about that next year when we discuss about our final era of Disney, which is the revival era. And we will talk about that during the 15th anniversary of Princess and the Frog. And by then, Wish will have come out, and that's supposed to be like the major Disney film that they're really trying to push for its own 100th anniversary. So we'll see how it stacks up compared to all the other films. But until then, Chris, thank you so much for coming on by. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always glad to be around. Stay rowdy, my friends.
All right. So please plug and promote your stuff.
Well, I've got a feeling that by the time this thing gets released, I'll have already completed what I've got planned for tomorrow, as of this recording, when I will be live streaming games 1 and 2 of the American League Division Series between the Texas Rangers and the Baltimore Orioles. Those will probably already be taken care of by the time you've uploaded and posted this. So I'll just let you know that we do, as far as what I've got planned for this coming month of October, both on TV Trash and for my Patreons. Let's just say I've got 3 words for you. Yabba dabba doo.
Nice. And as for me, you can check out my work, which is at oldschoollane.net, youtube.com/oldschoollane, facebook.com/oldschoollane. I'm on Twitter at Patty_B_Miranda. You can check me out on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, all those places. New episodes of the podcast will go there first, and then it'll go up in a few days on YouTube. We are currently in Old Spook Lane Creepy Chats, where Aaron and I are covering Tim Burton films for Tim Burton Month. And then afterwards, coming towards other podcasts throughout this month, I'm going to be meeting up with Paul Thomas, aka Gunter Fan 1992, where we'll be talking about Fiona and Cake, which is the spin-off / continuation series of Adventure Time.
I still got, and please, no spoilers to those for me, because I'm still trying to complete watching the original Adventure Time myself.
Okay then. Well, I think that we probably will go into like major spoilers over there, but we will give like minor discussions about that before we go over to major spoilers. So yeah, that's going to be coming up within the next few weeks or so. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Let us know in the comments below about all of your favorites from each and every single era: protagonist, animation, impact, sidekick, soundtrack slash song, all that good stuff. Please let us know. And don't worry, we will get to the revival era next year. So until then, everybody, take care. Have a good day. Bye bye.